Chapter 104. After chatting for a while, as Jin Wang had said, Yin Nuoxing took over and trained the 9 of them. He gave Yao Hua special treatment and tortured him until he was hovering between life and death. After exhausting all of their yuan energy, he clapped his hands and said goodbye to the 3 people on the platform before slowly leaving. Behind him, the 9 corpses looked at him with hidden bitterness as he leisurely walked away. His footsteps were light and graceful, completely different from how they were lying on the ground like dead dogs. The 9 of them bitterly smiled and quickly sat up. They circulated their yuan energy to heal their injuries. The training was not over yet. If they did not recover their strength, they would be tortured to death. It was simply inhumane. After coming out of the manor, Yin Nuoxing did not rush back to the inn. He secretly glanced back and slowly wandered around the streets. Although he was wandering aimlessly, Yin Nuoxing was walking with the mentality of seeing if he could hear any special news. He was also looking for treasures that had not been discovered yet. The special terrain and special events of Yuyin City had gathered a lot of information from other regions. Being able to find out in advance would bring him unlimited benefits. After all, he would have to travel the entire God realm in the future. If there were no accidents, he would have to rush into the starry sky. Most of the information he gathered would be strange and rare. Every bit of information he could gather would be good. I wonder if there are any forces or places that are specially used to communicate information. It would be great if there were. It would save me a lot of effort. With his arms folded, Yin Nuoxing muttered to himself. After walking on the streets for a while, he had heard the most about Purple Night Dark Flame. The repetition rate of information was too high. Moreover, he could not understand some of the accents. It would be very difficult for him to make any progress if he continued to wander around like this. In a city with Purple Night Dark Flame as its theme, many of the things that were produced were more or less related to Purple Night Dark Flame. Pills, armors, weapons, arrays, talismans, jewelry, and so on. Perhaps they were specially designed to restrain the fire element. Many of the things were mainly made of the water element. It could be assumed that the concept of water restraining fire was the concept. The concept of water restraining fire is correct. However, will this law be effective on this mutated flame? Don't you know how to counter it? Yin Nuoxing squatted down and gently picked up an exquisite piece of armor. It was glowing with a bright blue light and looked extremely sturdy. Her palm even felt moist when she touched it. Perhaps the effect of ice would be greater. After putting down the armor, Yin Nuoxing stood up and looked around, trying to find something else in her line of sight. It was colder than water. Although it was called ice, there was actually no such element as ice because it was essentially water. It was just a mutation. Most of the mutations of this element were congenital, and a small part of it was acquired. The probability of its appearance was between the appearance of special elements and the appearance of light elements. It was also an extremely rare type. You're overthinking it. Yin Nuoxing scratched her head in distress. She looked around the entire street, but didn't see anything related to ice. The probability of it appearing was very low, and it was impossible for accessories to appear. Water Prison Pill, a high-grade pill. The user will condense a layer of water elemental armor on the surface of the pill, specially used to deal with fire elemental attacks. Water Elemental Magic Tool, Immortal Rank, Magic Water Art, a high-grade water elemental mystic art. However, it's useless. Sighing, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but touch the 3 rings and pendants on her hand. Any one of these items could be used to buy this entire city. The quality was far superior to these items. However, there didn't seem to be anything related to the ice element. Xianine said that she had prepared everything for me. Could it be that I don't need something like elemental restraint? Her finger gently turned the purplish-red ring. Suddenly, she paused. Thinking of a certain possibility, Yin Nuoxing stuck out her tongue. Then, was she doing something useless again? Blinking his eyes, Yin Nuoxing quietly looked back and threw a gold coin to the peddler beside him. Then, under the peddler's extremely shocked gaze, he took a stick of sugar-coated haws and put it in his mouth. He leisurely walked forward, ignoring the peddler's shocked gaze. A gold coin for a stick of sugar-coated haws? How extravagant. Even selling a few hundred of them wouldn't be worth this price. That peddler stared at Yin Nuashing as she disappeared and muttered to himself. His tone sounded very excited, and he felt that he had made a huge profit. With a stick of sugar-coated haws in her mouth, Yin Nuashing walked through several streets. She deliberately controlled her speed and didn't rush or slow. After such a long time, only one piece of the gourd was missing. Walking to a relatively remote alley, Yin Nuashing lightly patted the wall. She glanced behind her and continued to calmly walk forward. When she reached a dead end, Yin Nuashing crushed a stick of sugar-coated haws in her mouth. She slowly turned around and looked at the empty alley. Her soul force quietly gushed out. Then, she softly said, 3 seconds. Come out or scram. Earlier, when he came out of the manor, he felt a faintly discernible gaze staring at him. At first, he thought that he was overthinking. Until he strolled on the streets, the feeling of being watched still didn't disappear. It seemed that he was being followed. Thinking of this, Yin Nuashing's face couldn't help but twitch a few times. Why was he being followed again? There were quite a lot of stalkers this year, and they were quite professional. If it wasn't for his soul force being amplified by the 5 elements, he might not have been able to sense them. Speaking of which, he didn't have any relatives or enemies. Why was he always being followed? It was impossible for anyone to recognize him. The heaven-defying ultimate god also seemed to recognize him. Those bad probing should have been eliminated by him. Moreover, the Ling Hong sword on him also blocked the probing of heaven's secrets. Unless one was a profound celestial master, they shouldn't be able to divine his situation. Just as Yin Nuashing's face gradually darkened, at the corner, a fiery red little fellow poked its head out. Its bright eyes carefully looked at Yin Nuashing, and then it shrank back. Narrowing his eyes, Yin Nuashing stretched out his hand and threw out a shining golden chain, detaining that sneaky thing. He glanced at it gloomily, and then his face became very funny. His face twitched for a long time, and he didn't know what to say. Chirp, chirp. The little fellow that was detained had a body of fiery red feathers. Its pitch-black eyes revealed an uneasy look, and it seemed to be a little uneasy when facing Yin Nuashing. This is a phoenix? No, it's a phoenix descendant. Staring at the fiery little phoenix that was less than 2 feet in size and was surrounded by blazing fire elements, Yin Nuashing was a little confused. Why was this little baby magical beast following him? He didn't have anything edible on him. If he wanted fire elements, he could find a few people on the streets who had better fire elements than him. Chirp, chirp. The golden chain was loosened. The little phoenix seemed to know that Yin Nuashing wouldn't harm it, so it flapped its wings and circled around Yin Nuashing, as if it wanted to express something. Yin Nuashing scratched his head. Looking at it circling around for a long time, he still couldn't guess what it wanted to express. Helplessly, he waved his hand and shook his head, indicating that he didn't understand. Chirp! The little phoenix looked at his confused look and became even more anxious. It jumped directly into his arms and pecked out the purple-red pendant. The bird's beak pointed to the pendant, and then pointed to the stone floor and cried out loudly. Yin Nuashing was confused, looking at it jumping up and down, pecking at his pendant for a while, and jumping on the floor for a while. He really didn't know what it wanted to express. He simply took out the things in the pendant, a piece of dark green jade that he got from Muingzi, and a blueprint that he didn't know what it was for. He had never studied these 2 things since he took them out. Chirp! The little phoenix shook its head, indicating that it wasn't. God-level weapons, various medicinal pills, various array diagrams, and all kinds of strange things, but they were all rejected one by one. Chirp! In the end, Yin Nuashing took out the stone egg that he brought out from the magma world. Only then did the little phoenix jump up and chirp excitedly. Then, without waiting for Yin Nuashing to react, it bumped into the stone egg, making the fiery red runes and array on the surface of the stone egg brighten a little, and then it disappeared. In the blink of an eye, the little phoenix disappeared, leaving behind a pile of things and the bright stone egg. Yin Nuashing was baffled. What happened just now happened in less than a second, and the phoenix rushed into the stone and disappeared. He couldn't stop it. Could it be that this stone is a phoenix egg? Picking up this somewhat warm stone, Yin Nuashing threw it in his hand twice, and found that there seemed to be many fiery red patterns on the stone egg, flickering rhythmically like a heart. The phoenix, one of the ancient mythological beasts, was said to be born in endless flames. It was immortal and indestructible. Every time it died, it would turn into a pile of ashes and condense into a phoenix egg, waiting to be hatched. The phoenix was reborn from the ashes. Its feathers were more plentiful, its voice was clearer, and its spirit was more profound. It could be said that it was the only mythological beast that obtained power from death, the purest phoenix, and there was only one in the world. Kacha. While Yun Nuashing was playing with this stone, the fiery red runes and array on the surface of the stone suddenly dimmed, and all the light and energy converged. The stone suddenly split open, and cracks as thick as a thumb appeared. Pink, scarlet, and purplish-black light penetrated through the cracks, and the dazzling light made Yun Nuashing close her eyes. She quickly spread out an energy shield in her hand, isolating the changes here so that others wouldn't discover it. Kacha! After the first crack appeared, it was as if there was a chain reaction. Cracks spread out in a crisscrossing manner, and strange runes appeared under the cracks. A moment later, many cracks wrapped around the entire stone egg. With a bang, stone fragments flew in all directions, and the light dimmed. Only then did Yin Nua slowly open his eyes. What appeared in front of her was a 1-meter-tall, liquid-like egg. Half of the egg was deep black, and the other half was dazzling pink and scarlet. The colors were like flowing light, constantly mixing and combining. The three colors maintained a self-balance, and none of the colors were more or less than the original. The hot fire element flowed in the air, and the dense fire element energy in the sky seemed to be affected, falling from the sky and connecting to the top of the egg in the shape of a funnel. It really is a phoenix egg. Yin Nuashing was stunned. Her face twitched a few times when she felt the sudden surge of fire element energy in the surroundings. Who would have thought that the seemingly famous stone she casually picked up would actually be a phoenix in Nirvana? No wonder it needs an altar to guide the energy in order to create a world of lava. If it wasn't for that phoenix descendant, it wouldn't have been able to break the seal so early. Yin Nuashing smiled helplessly as she gently stroked the scalding phoenix egg. The phoenix egg emitted a faint light, and under Yin Nuashing's astonished gaze, it turned into a ray of light, rushed in her forehead, and merged with her soul. Chapter 105. Yin Nuashing was startled by the phoenix egg's sudden movement. He let out a small cry and staggered back a few steps. A red and black circular mark slowly appeared on his forehead, making him look very demonic. After being stunned for a moment, his consciousness quickly cut into his soul. There a small ball of light was emitting a warm glow and settling down in a spot in his soul. The god's imprint that was carved by Xianyin, which was wandering outside his soul, did not obstruct it in the slightest. It seemed to have divided it into a non-threatening part, allowing the phoenix egg to live in his soul. My body is not a treasure chest. Don't let everything in. Yin Nuashing did not know whether to laugh or cry. Why were there so many things in his body? A dozen divine weapons, a godhead weapon, a god's imprint, and now there was an egg in his soul. My value is getting higher and higher. Should I put something else in next time? Yin Nuashing laughed self-deprecatingly as he touched the new imprint on his forehead with his finger. He did not understand why so many things liked to enter his body, but they all seemed to be strengthening his body intentionally or unintentionally. He was quite happy with this situation. As long as it was not harmful, no matter how many things entered his body, he would keep them all. Yin Nuashing grinned as he thought of this. He put away the pile of things beside him, identified the direction, and skipped back in the direction of the inn. His cheerful appearance gave off the feeling of a deep well of ice. Little star, did something good happen? Why are you so excited? Yuyin could not help but ask when she saw Yin Nuashing's warm and gentle smile as soon as she entered the room. About that, Yin Nuashing could not help but laugh when he heard that. He pointed at the imprint on his forehead and briefly explained what had just happened. So, the main point is that you accidentally picked up a phoenix and brought it back. After listening to Yun Nuoxing's extravagant explanation, Yu Yin's Mei Mao was also excited. An ancient divine beast phoenix. Just the title alone was enough to move many people's hearts. Divine beasts were the same as other magical beasts and demonic beasts. They could take out the beast's soul and subdue it as one's own power. They could also connect directly with it, similar to a contract. They could obtain the beast's power without killing it, allowing the two to share and assimilate. They would share lifespan and power. This was countless times better than the first method of directly killing the beast and obtaining the beast's soul to transform into one's own power. As an immortal bird, the phoenix had been passed down for countless years. Its power was naturally not something that other beasts could compare to. At this moment, the phoenix's nirvana egg appeared in Yun Nuoxing's hands. How could he not be excited when he suddenly obtained such a powerful divine beast? It's just an egg. It won't hatch so quickly and become a phoenix. However, I'm very surprised that the seal was broken so quickly. I originally planned to throw it in a corner to collect dust, but I didn't expect. Yun Nuoxing spread his hands. With a thought, the 1-meter-tall phoenix egg that looked like it was flowing with colorful lights appeared in his hands. Surging fire elements filled the room. Big brother, what is this? Ming held little purple soul and ran over from behind Yuan. He could not help but ask when he saw the colorful egg in Yun Nuoxing's hands. This is a phoenix egg. Yun Nuoxing tossed the egg in his hands. He smiled and threw it to Ming. The two little girls immediately surrounded the egg curiously. They looked left and right as they knocked on the blazing phoenix egg. Is there such a big egg? Ming's little hand was scalded. He hurriedly pulled it back and shook it with all his might as he muttered softly. From what he knew, an egg was not as big as a fist. This is the egg of a divine beast. Of course, it's different. Yun Nuoxing put the phoenix egg back into his soul. Then, she used the water elements to apply on Ming's scalded little hand and smiled. Yuan looked at Yun Nuoxing with a gentle expression and asked, "Did you find out anything?" She gently stroked little purple soul's soft and smooth hair. I have some information." Yun Nuoxing nodded and told Yuan about Jin Wang's speculations. Underworld Emperor. Yuan frowned when she heard this. The gap between the gods was huge. Not to mention the gap between the great realms, it was already very difficult to fight someone of a higher realm. This could be seen from the fact that 4 divine artifacts could trap a divine underworld elite, but more than 10 divine artifacts were needed to trap a heavenly god elite. Although his strength had increased, his limit was probably only to deal with divine kings. As for the emperor of the underworld, there's still a way without the swirling zither. Yun Nuoxing smiled as he knew what she was thinking. He had just thought of a special method that was worth trying. Yun Nuoxing smiled meaningfully as he sat on the bed with Ming in his arms. The normal method of activating the array is to use divine weapons as the small array core. However, someone seems to be very good at analyzing and using weapons. He has some unique methods that surpass others. If we can use them as a reference, the combined array's power should increase by a lot. The unique method you're talking about can't be referring to the sacred weapon shrine, right? Hearing this, Yuan immediately recalled the scene back in Constellation City when the Sacred Weapons Divine Hall had unleashed a weapon array that had actually trapped all the experts. It seemed that the large and small array cores were all weapons, right? Although there were many of them, if they were all replaced with divine weapons, even if there were fewer of them, the array's power might increase instead of decreasing. Do we have to make a trip to the Sacred Weapons Shrine? Yui nodded and asked again. The Sacred Weapons Shrine was a very evil shrine. No matter what they did, they mainly used weapons. Moreover, that unique weapon control method was strictly forbidden to be spread to outsiders. If an outsider obtained it, they could only pray that it wasn't discovered. If the people from a Sacred Weapons Shrine found out, they would definitely send someone to take it back. It was very simple to make that person unable to use this secret method again. They just had to kill him. Well, I haven't thought about it yet. The hand that was stroking Ming's head paused. Yin Nuoxing looked away and said calmly. However, he basically rejected this idea. The 9 elemental shrines and the 8 great ancient families didn't dare to casually provoke the sacred weapon shrine. This was enough to prove how powerful the sacred weapon shrine was. With his current ability, he would only be delivering a weapon to them. Let's wait. The Purple Night Dark Flame is such a big matter. I reckon they will also send someone over. Divine flames are born naturally. Not only are they helpful to alchemists, they are also very helpful to blacksmiths. If the sacred weapon shrine doesn't have a kind of divine flame, they will definitely find a way to obtain one. The Purple Night Dark Flame that is ranked 90th won't be noticed by powerful experts. This is an excellent opportunity for them. Yin Nuoxing thought for a while. Since Jin Wang said that those old monsters basically didn't have any interest in those ranked 60th and above, then the experts that would come shouldn't be too strong. The difficulty of obtaining the Purple Night Dark Flame would also be relatively lower. Okay, Yin spread her hands and nodded. But in order to increase the success rate, let's go ask Jin Wang for help. Looking at the still, somewhat bright sky, Yin Nuoxing rubbed her palms with her fingers. After thinking for a while, she decided to ask Jin Wang for help. If she didn't succeed in the end, there would be someone to clean up the mess. Yui nodded and didn't object. Yin Nuoxing immediately set off for the eastern city. Are you looking for someone from the Sacred Weapons Shrine? In the main hall of the Sacred Weapons Shrine, a dozen people were sitting casually. Suddenly, a person appeared in the middle of the hall. Their spirits were slightly lifted. When they saw that it was Yin Nuoxing, they all smiled. However, when they heard Yin Nuoxing's words, the smiles on their faces stiffened. Yes, the sacred artifact Divine Hall's unique weapon controlling secret method and formation will be of great help to me. If I can obtain them, it will be of great help to me in seizing the Purple Night Dark Flame. Yin Nuoxing nodded and was pulled to a seat by the wood spirit as he spoke softly. TSK Tisk. Jin Wang shook his head with a bitter smile. His bright golden eyes looked at Yin Nuoxing strangely. After remaining silent for a long while, he said, "You are too bold. Normal people would run away from the sacred weapon shrine as soon as they see it, but you still want to stick to them. Seriously, according to the information we received, the people from the sacred weapon shrine will indeed come here to join in. However, we don't know when they will come. Even if they come, they will most likely come prepared. There are more than a few people paying attention to the Purple Night Dark Flame. It won't do to not have a backup plan. Under these circumstances, it's not very appropriate to target them," Jin Wang said slowly. "Yes, I don't have any other ideas. I have to try everything. If it really comes down to it, I'll just use, Yin Nuoxing tilted her head. Halfway through her sentence, she felt that she almost spilled the beans. She hurriedly stopped herself and changed her words. At most, I'll just use a dozen god weapons to smash them to death. Hearing this, dozens of black lines appeared on everyone's forehead. Even if you have a lot of god weapons, you don't have to do this, right? Just throw them to smash them to death. Yes, combined with the killing formation, it should be possible to deal with god-level gods. I think it's worth a try." Yin Nuoxing rubbed her fingers on the armrest of the chair. She added in her heart, "At most, I'll just use Ling Hong's sword." Everyone shuddered when they heard this, especially Jin Wang and the other two. Their faces twitched violently. God-level gods were a level higher than them. How could they kill them just like that? Since when did God-level gods sound so worthless? All right, if you insist on doing so, we can help you as well. Seeing the determination written on Yin Nuoxing's face, Jin Wang shook his head helplessly. How could he not know the purpose of the former's visit? Of course, she wanted to get them help. Therefore, he agreed. After all, he might be that person's man. No matter what, he had to help. Then where are they? Hearing Jin Wang agree, Yin Nuoxing stood up excitedly. Everyone's faces twitched again when they saw her impatient look. Why are you so excited? Sensing that the atmosphere was not quite right, Yin Nuoxing laughed awkwardly and slowly sat down. She scratched her head embarrassedly. They haven't arrived yet. When we receive the news, We will inform you. Now, let's start preparing. We also have to make some preparations. Jin Wang sighed helplessly and said to Yin Nuoxing, the matter of attacking the Sacred Weapon Palace involved a lot of people. Although the 9 elemental palaces were not afraid of them, no one was willing to take on too much trouble. Therefore, it was better to do it cleanly. Okay. Yin Nuoxing nodded. She also had to make some preparations for the operation that day. Chapter 106. After coming out of the manor, Yin Nuoxing did not directly return to the inn. Instead, he spread out his 6 wings and circled around Yuyin City. He observed some special positions and places so that he could make some preparations in case of any unexpected situations in the future. Yuyin City was only a few tens of thousands of miles long and wide. Although the numbers sounded very shocking, it was much smaller than other cities that were hundreds of thousands of miles long. The streets were like stars in the sky, and there were many buildings of various colors. Even though it was close to dusk, there were still many people coming and going on the streets. It was a peaceful scene, and it was impossible to tell that there was a purple night dark flame above the city that had the power to destroy the world. In the center of the city, there was a purple gold palace that was much larger than the other buildings. It was like a primordial beast that was quietly crawling on the ground. The majestic feeling made people feel deep veneration. Different from the other palaces, there was a slender spear at the top of this palace that was pointing at the sky, as if it was going to pierce through the heavens. That's the Yuyin Pavilion. Looking at the 3,000-meter-tall building, Yin Nuoxing had an uncomfortable feeling. He faintly felt a sense of rejection in his heart. This feeling made Yin Nuoxing stunned for a moment. He had never felt this way before. Looking around, Ling Hongjian appeared in his hand under the control of his mind. The dislocated barrier automatically spread out and wrapped around Yin Nuoxing. His vision also changed. The city below became empty. The streets that were filled with people just a moment ago were now empty. In the sky, a huge magic circle formed by energy matrices was operating continuously. The dense magic circle completely covered the space behind. You can see the world like this. The barrier disappeared, and this change caused Yin Nuoxing to be stunned. His eyes carried a trace of surprise as he looked at the array in the sky that was used to cover the purple night flame. The array was still slowly wriggling, and countless threads automatically broke down and reassembled. At every moment, a new array was being formed, causing his evil spirit eye to be defeated. Of course, this did not mean that his evil spirit eye could not do anything to him, because Yin Nuoxing's cultivation was still too low, and his evil spirit eye was not strong enough. If Muingzi were to come here and take a look, although he might not be able to break through it, at least he would not be helpless, and this was the influence of his own strength. I really don't know who used this array. It's purely to embarrass people. Shaking his head, Yin Nuoxing did not go forward to take a look. His figure moved, and he quickly flew towards the purple gold palace. In just a few minutes, Yin Nuoxing stood in front of the purple gold palace. As Ling Hongjian had spread out a barrier, in an ordinary barrier world, it was not a unique space. Only when a barrier of the same strength was spread out could one see that he was in this barrier world. And with the power of Ling Hongjian, it was estimated that he was at the level of an Empyrean god. His footsteps slowly moved. His gaze did not idle as he sized up the palace. The swirling zither appeared in his arms. With the swirling zither in his hand, the uneasiness in his heart lessened a little. His body floated in midair. Yin Nuoxing circled around the palace. He did not find anything special, but he felt that something was wrong. There seemed to be a strange energy flowing, but he could not sense the source. He only felt that it was in the palace. He gently placed his palm on the wall of the palace. The place where he touched was icy cold. A strange wave drilled out from the wall, penetrated his arm, and went out again, disappearing into the air. Something strange. Yin Nuoxing frowned. He circled around a few more times, wanting to find out the reason. However, other than making him gasp for breath, he did not find anything. Now, he was just short of directly breaking the door to take a look. It's also very strange that I can't find anything strange. His face twitching, Yin Nuoxing raised his head to look at the palace that seemed to have a lot of history. He slowly turned around and looked at Yuyan City. He wanted to take a look at it from the perspective of the founder. However, when he turned around, he saw some clues. The Yuyan Pavilion was built on a high ground. It was much higher than all the other buildings. In Yun Nuoxing's vision, there were still scattered streets. However, if he looked carefully, he would find that the end of these streets seemed to be this high ground. Blinking his eyes, Yun Nuoxing walked to the edge and looked down at the city. He slowly circled around the edge. Half an hour later, he stood in front of the palace gate again. He looked down at the streets and muttered to himself, "The center of this city is this palace. Even the arrangement of the streets is like this. Why? Is it an original design? Is it a whim?" Yin Nuoxing could not help but tighten his grip on the swirling dragon zither. He casually raised his head and his eyes froze. He was completely stunned. The center of this barrier was facing the palace. Hey, it can't be. Thinking of those disorderly streets in this strange palace, who would be bored enough to build a palace on a high ground? Wouldn't it be stupid to do so? To make it so that people could not come up? Spreading out his 6 wings, Yin Nuoxing floated into the air as his bright, evil spirit eyes slowly opened. Looking at the palace, then at the city, Yin Nuoxing grinned, so that's how it is. What a good serene flame pavilion. He landed back on the ground and looked at the array above his head. Yin Nuoxing lifted his feet and walked to the gate of the palace that was 1,000 feet tall. He lifted his leg and kicked it open. He stepped in with a single step. A gust of chilly wind rushed towards him. It was mixed with a hot gust of wind. It fiercely hit Yin Nuoxing, who had just stepped in. "There's a ghost." Yin Nuoxing smiled. He hugged the swirling dragon zither with his left hand, and the heavenly halberd appeared in his hand. He did not inject any energy and directly swept the halberd across. After that experience in the Ghost Chief Forest, Yin Nuoxing had not used the Sun God Bow. Last time in the Divine Weapon City, he had no choice but to use it. The Sun God Bow needed to be inputted with his own energy. With his current cultivation, even if he had a divine weapon, he would not be able to display the power of a large realm. Compared to this, it was more convenient to use the heavenly halberd's own energy. Moreover, it did not consume any energy. Of course, if he wanted to, he could also use the Sun God Bow to attack. Pong! The two forces collided and let out a low, muffled sound. The majestic force traveled up the heavenly halberd to his arm. However, Yin Nuoxing's shoulder only trembled for a moment before returning to normal. The heavenly halberd was placed horizontally in front of his chest. Mortal level 6 Yuan Li broke out from his body. His evil spirit I was also activated at the first moment, vigilant of the changes in his surroundings. Yin Nuoxing did not expect to be attacked as soon as he entered. According to his assumption, something would jump out only when he reached the deepest part of the palace. After making this attack, the thing that ambushed him did not move at all. Only then did Yin Nuoxing have the time to take a look at the palace. However, the interior was pitch black. There was not even a single lamp. It was dark and swarthy. It was not as high-end as it looked from the outside. His Yuan Li flowed out with his soul, illuminating the interior of the palace. At the same time, the divine mirror of light, the golden chain, and the sun god Bao shot out together, protecting Yin Nuoxing from the left, right, and back. If there was one thing he wanted to say right now, "I'm afraid of the dark. Sister, Ming, Soul, who's going to save me?" At this moment, Yin Nuoxing was on the verge of crying. The hand holding the heavenly halberd was constantly trembling. His left hand hugged the whirlpool zither tightly. With a thought, the 18 divine artifacts stored in the pendant all appeared. The golden chain that tightly wrapped around Yin Nuoxing's back and had unfolded and wrapped around his entire body. Damn, at least there were lights in the ancient ruins. Forget it. It'll be over soon. Yin Nuoxing bitterly smiled, shook his head, and continued to walk into the palace. There was not a single sound in the quiet passage. The soft footsteps produced some echoes in the empty space. A thick layer of dust had accumulated on the floor. When he turned around, he could see his own footprints. After walking for a full 10 minutes, he finally reached the center of the palace. Only then did he have the time to look around. There was nothing inside the palace. There were no tables, chairs, or lights. Even the corridor and the walls beside it were covered in spider webs. It seemed like no one had cleaned this place for a long time. That's... His gaze paused for a moment. The narrow space lit up. Yin Nuoxing looked up and saw many statues placed on both sides of the walls. They were covered in dust. Statues? Walking to the wall on the right side of the door, Yin Nuoxing looked at the 10 feet tall statue in front of him and was stunned. He gently exhaled and blew away the dust. Under the dust, there was a dull bronze color. Bronze statue. He wiped the shiny bronze area with his palm. After a moment, the dust was wiped clean. Under the dim light, there was a faint yellow glow. Yin Nuoxing's pupil shrank. Crack! A soft sound entered his ears, causing the heart of a certain person, who was already afraid of the dark, to suddenly shrink. Before he could turn around, he saw that the 3-meter-tall bronze figure in front of him suddenly trembled slightly, and the dust on its body fell off. Seeing this scene, Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He looked up and saw that the bronze statue had unknowingly raised a pair of thick and strong arms and smashed them down at him. He reflexively stomped his feet, and his figure hurriedly flew backward. The divine light mirror also shone a ray of light on his body. Bam! The bronze fist smashed into the ground. The huge force caused the entire serene flame pavilion to tremble. Dust filled the air. 100 meters away, Yin Nuoxing looked at the dust in shock. His cheeks trembled. If he reacted a tenth of a second later, he would have died. Bam! A dull sound came from the dust. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He quickly stood up for kneeling on one knee. He held the heavenly halberd in his hand and looked carefully. A black shadow walked out of the dust with heavy steps. It was the bronze statue just now. Yin Nuoxing shuddered violently when his gaze met the bronze eyes. Then he saw the bronze man rush towards him with earth-shaking steps. A pair of fists the size of praying mats swung through the air with a whistling sound. Bronze statue? No, this is a puppet. The huge pressure made Yin Nuoxing suck in a breath of cold air. His body rolled to the left, and then he felt a chill on his cheeks. At the place where he was just now, an air cannon hit the floor, blasting out a hole about 10 feet in size. Wow! Yin Nuoxing sneered as he turned his head to look at the hole. This pure physical strength. Yin Nuoxing looked over and quickly raised his halberd. Then, he smashed it toward the copper fist that was whizzing towards him. Clang! The sound of metal colliding was mixed with a wisp of sound wave. It bombarded Yin Nuoxing's body, causing his face to turn pale. A trace of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. The heavenly halberd violently swept away the puppet, and he used the force to retreat quickly. A God King-level puppet. Yin Nuoxing casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He felt a little bitter. It was indeed a coincidence that he defeated Tian Bingzi previously. Chapter 107. Clang! The sound of metal vibrating entered Yin Nuoxing's body with a majestic force. Even though his body had been tempered by the string music and was extremely strong, he still felt that his organs were resonating with it. The heavenly halberd swept past. Yin Nuoxing gritted his teeth and waved his other hand. A golden spear came out of his sleeve and was thrown at the bronze statue with all his strength. This spear was the one that Tian Bingzi had impaled him with. After coming into contact with it, it had very consciously entered his body. Just like the golden chains and the others, it was a high-grade divine artifact. However, in his hands, it was difficult for him to use its original strength. The golden spear turned into a bolt of lightning and pierced through the air towards the bronze statue. The bronze statue did not dodge. Instead, it stretched out its right hand mechanically and slapped it. Clang! 2 crisp sounds rang out at the same time. The golden spear was casually sent flying, and Yin Nuoxing also took advantage of this moment. The light elements brought him to the back of the bronze statue in a flash. The Fontaine halberd carried the power of the 5 elements and slashed the bronze statue's shoulder, but it made his hands numb. Who made this bronze statue? Why is it so hard? The light elements surged and brought Yin Nuoxing back quickly. He did not forget to curse along the way. When the divine weapon hit the bronze statue's shoulder, it was no different from hitting a rock. Ling Hong. Yin Nuoxing waved his left hand in the air and shouted. A blue light gradually formed in front of him. However, before he could grab the Ling Hong sword, he felt a sense of danger. Turning his head abruptly, he saw a dark yellow light the size of a praying mat rapidly approaching. Under the situation of promotion, he did not have time to think at all. The light element broke out of his body uncontrollably, bringing Yin Nuoxing's body along as it flew away like lightning. Boom! The golden fist landed heavily on Yin Nuoxing's shoulder, causing his blood to churn. His face turned pale, and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His body brushed against the ground and flew hundreds of meters away. He could even feel that he had lost control of his right arm. Bam! Poochie! It rolled across the ground like a gourd for more than 10 rounds before heavily crashing into the wall of the palace. The terrifying force directly shook a hole in the wall, causing debris to fly everywhere and a cloud of dust to fall. Yin Nuoxing was expressionless. She pressed her left hand on her right shoulder and slowly stood up. Her face was covered in dust, and she looked extremely disheveled. She glared fiercely at the 2 bronze statues that were walking over together and spat fiercely. Treacherous brat, I've never heard of a dead person being able to launch a sneak attack. A 5-colored energy rose from his right arm, and his broken arm gradually recovered. In less than 10 seconds, it was back to normal. After being tempered by string notes, his recovery speed was terrifying. Given my current strength, I won't even be able to bring out 30% of my strength with a god artifact, Zhang Xian said with a frown. Ling Hongjian was broken before it even came out, and there was even an extra bronze statue. Looking at the dissipating Ling Hongjian in his left hand, Yin Nuoxing frowned. Could it be that Ling Hongjian cannot be pulled out? I don't believe that I can't. Sneering at herself, Yin Nuoxing stomped her foot on the ground, and a roar came from her throat. The ground under the 2 bronze statues suddenly started to shake rapidly. Soon after, 2 huge blazing fire pillars erupted like volcanoes and bombarded the bodies of the bronze statues with lightning speed. Bam! Such a powerful impact directly sent the 2 bronze statues flying into the sky. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing's right hand released the heavenly halberd and swept it across the empty space in front of her. An azure light rapidly gathered in her palm. Chi! Just as Ling Hongjian was about to completely appear, the sound of wind breaking was clearly transmitted into Yin Nuoxing's ears. Immediately, he let out an evil laugh. The light elements that had gathered at his feet gushed out in all directions. His body also swiftly passed through space, leaving behind a golden streak of light that streaked across the original spot. Lin Hong's sword. Yin Nuoxing's figure streaked across space at lightning speed. She felt the icy cold sensation from her right palm and grinned. She stomped her foot on the ground and forcefully stopped her forward body, after which her right hand swung violently at the 3 bronze statues that were charging over. Clang! The sword arc, which was as fine as a needle, perfectly cut out a flat surface. Vast spatial energy surged out from Ling Hong's sword and instantly smashed onto the body of the bronze statue. Immediately, a clear knocking sound rang throughout the entire great hall. Faintly, a small hole was torn open in the space. Spatial rend. Yin Nuoxing's face darkened when she saw that only half of the bronze statues had been cut open. She clenched her teeth, and her right hand, which had just paused, suddenly swung down again. The power of the Lin Hong sword was completely unleashed at this moment. Clang, clang, clang. The thick silver crescent moon brought along a boundless power as it smashed against the bronze statues, emitting a deafening sound that shook the heavens. Soon after, with a loud bang, The three bronze statues completely exploded under Yun Nuoxing's relaxed gaze. Boom! At the same time, a huge crack abruptly extended across the entire Great Hall. Even a bottomless ravine had appeared in Yuyan City. Thunderous rumbles that sounded like an earthquake were echoing across the land. Huff! After the bronze statues exploded, Yun Nuoxing completely relaxed. She sat on the ground and panted rapidly. She tilted her head and looked at the huge crack that covered the ceiling and the floor. She could not help but bitterly laugh. Luckily, this is the spirit formation world. The wounds caused by the Linhong sword will not appear in the real world. I don't know who is so vicious as to refine a corpse into a puppet. If that person knew about this, I'm afraid that he would be so angry that his coffin lid would lift up. Shaking his numb right hand, Yun Nuoxing sighed again. Feeling the yuan power in her body receding like a tide, Yun Nuoxing fiercely sucked in a breath of air. She hurriedly stood up and was about to rush towards the door. However, without waiting for him to take 2 steps, the Linhong sword in his hand suddenly dimmed and finally entered his arm. And around his body, a silver-blue energy shield also reappeared and was slowly disappearing. It's over, it's over. It's over. Seeing that his yuan power was no longer able to maintain the enchantment and was slowly dissipating, his swift footsteps came to an abrupt halt. A drop of cold sweat the size of a bean slid down his forehead and landed on his bitter smile, causing his complexion to become much paler. Crack! Oh my God! It's over. The sound of the spirit formation breaking was accompanied by a scream from the bottom of her heart. Yun Nuoxing seemed to have accepted her fate. She suddenly closed her eyes and even turned her head to the side. She seemed to have seen dozens of experts from the Serene Flame Pavilion rushing over like wolves and tigers. I originally thought that not many people would visit in the middle of the night. I didn't expect that I would be late. A clear voice sounded behind Yun Nuoxing. It was accompanied by the sound of fingernails gently scratching the long sword. There was even some admiration. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Visit in the middle of the night? Arrived late? Shouldn't she be waiting to be chopped into pieces or tied up? This voice was a little strange, wasn't it? Thinking of this, she could not help but gently squint her eyes. What she saw was not a bright hall, nor were there any experts eyeing her covetously. In the hall, the only light was the moonlight that seeped in. She slowly turned around. A beautiful girl with a slightly pale face was standing behind her and smiling at him. Her jade-like hands were by her side, and she was holding a long sword that glowed with a silver light. The girl was dressed in snow-white clothes. Her eyebrows were slender, her eyes were phoenix-shaped, her lips were crimson, and her eyes were like the morning stars. The long silver sword swayed slightly. Standing there, she was like a willow branch swaying in the wind. She had an indescribable charm. It was the middle of the night. Why did a beautiful girl come to this ghostly place instead of sleeping? Not to mention that it was full of dust. There were 70 to 80 dead people and ghosts in the corner. Even if she wanted to have sex, she had to choose a good place, right? Yun Nuoxing's eyes quickly looked around. Her expression suddenly changed. Something was not right. She was the only one here. It was lifeless and did not seem like a place where a living person stayed. Could it be that it was haunted? Although she did not know if she had encountered a ghost, Yun Nuoxing still trembled all over. She could not help but have goosebumps all over her body. She hurriedly took a step back. That beautiful girl saw that Yun Nuoxing did not speak for a long time and was only looking at her with a strange and frightened gaze. She was stunned and hurriedly called out softly, young master," she called out a few times. Only then did Yun Nuoxing return to his senses. He raised his head and met that pair of limpid eyes. He smiled and said, "Little girl, what's the matter?" "Little girl?" Hearing Yun Nuoxing address her in such a manner, the exceptional beauty was clearly stunned for a moment. Her beautiful eyes looked at him strangely as she softly muttered, "You don't look much older than me." Acting like an old man, his ears twitched slightly. Yun Nuoxing did not mind and smiled. Ever since he met Xianin, he had considered himself an old man. In his opinion, it was not wrong to say so, After thinking for a long time, he threw these thoughts aside. Looking at the beautiful girl, he smiled and said, "Little girl, why are you not sleeping in the middle of the night? Why did you come here? Could it be that you and your lover?" Ahem. Especially when she covered her mouth and coughed at the end, it made the beautiful girl's sparkling face suddenly turn dark red. There was an indescribable charm in her eyes. She cursed in her heart and hurriedly turned her head away. She hurriedly said, "I'm here to investigate the Serene Flame Pavilion." "Oh, then where'd you find out?" Hearing this, Yin Nuashing laughed heartily. "Tell me, and let me hear it. Maybe I can give you some pointers." Hearing Yun Nuashing's strange way of addressing her, the beautiful girl stared at him in a daze. His miserable appearance with some bloodstains seemed to have just been through a fierce battle. However, when she sensed his cultivation, a trace of doubt flashed across her beautiful eyes. Yes, he appeared out of thin air. Could it be a boundary? Thinking of this possibility, the beautiful girl suddenly understood. It was difficult to weave a boundary without a certain level of skill and cultivation. However, seeing Yun Nuashing's frivolous but calm, handsome face, the beautiful girl was a loss again. No matter how monstrous he was only immortal stage level 6. Could it be that he is an array master? Thinking of another profession, she suddenly understood. Seeing the beautiful girl's face change rapidly, Yun Nuashing's cheeks could not help but tremble a few times. He said indifferently, "So, did you think of something?" Chapter 108. Through the moonlight, Yun Nuashing could clearly see the appearance of the main hall. It was much clearer than in the boundary world, and there were no traces left behind by Ling Hongjian. In the corner, there were 70 to 80 puppets covered in dust. The main hall was still the same as before. Other than the addition of a beautiful girl in white, there was nothing different. Seeing that he had been holding his right shoulder, with blood flowing out from between his fingers and a pair of black eyes staring at her in a daze, the beautiful girl finally reacted. She put the long sword back into the scabbard and pressed Yun Nuashing to sit down. She took out a piece of cloth from somewhere and gently bandaged his right shoulder. "I still don't know young master's name." A gentle voice came from behind. Yun Nuashing raised his head and looked back slightly. Seeing the beautiful girl's focused and serious face, a strange feeling was born in his heart. "Yun Nuashing, little girl, can you tell me what you're doing here in the middle of the night?" Yun Nuashing turned his head back and asked with a smile. "I have a name. Don't call me little girl." The beautiful girl snorted. Her two small hands that were holding onto the strip of cloth angrily pulled and tightly bandaged the wound. However, she saw that Yun Nuashing only frowned and did not have any other reaction. She could not help but be stunned. "Young master can just call me Xue Qing. I came to the Serene Flame Pavilion to investigate the Purple Night Dark Flame. However, I did not expect that the Serene Flame Pavilion was already empty." Xue Qing sighed. "Purple Night Dark Flame?" Yin Nuashing turned his head in confusion. Those who came to the Serene Flame City were all here for the Purple Night Dark Flame. This was definitely true. However, he asked, "Xue Qing, you're the water element, right? Why are you also interested in the divine flame?" Xue Qing was stunned. She did not reveal any aura at all. How did he know that she was of the water element? "Yes, I was asked by someone to come and take a look. Young Master Yin also said that I control the water element and the divine flame is not important to me. Someone in the sect is coveting the Purple Night Dark Flame and sent me to investigate," Xue Qing said softly. "But after coming here, I realized that there are many people who want the Purple Night Dark Flame. There are many hidden dragons and crouching tigers in Yuyan City. Not long after coming here, I've already discovered more than a dozen shocking major forces. I'm even thinking if I should go back and ask teacher to give up." Xue Qing released her hand and sighed. Then she smiled and said, "However, those are matters for teacher to decide. I don't care so much. I only care about investigating and reporting. Everything else is not my concern." Yin Nuashing helplessly shook his head. There were indeed too many people in Yuyan City, and many people from large factions were here. He was also a bit worried, so he nodded and stood up. He looked around and was stunned for a moment, and his expression gradually became serious. Sir Yun, seeing the change in his expression, Xueqing reflexively drew her sword. Mei Mao looked around warily. Shoo! Yin Nuoxing put his finger in front of his lips and made a soft shushing sound. He squatted down and looked at the place where he had just sat. Over there, the dust had been brushed away, leaving only a thin layer of dust on the floor. Under the moonlight, he could see the scarlet floor. However, what surprised him was not the floor, but under the floor, there was a light blue, faintly discernible light. Xueqing also squatted down with him. Seeing the flickering blue lines, Mei Mao was astonished. This is an array. Yes, and it is a blood sacrifice array. Yin Nuoxing nodded. Blood sacrifice. Hearing this, Xueqing covered her mouth in shock and looked at him in shock. With a sigh, Yin Nuoxing stood up. He slowly gathered his essence force in his palm. With a wave of his hand, a gust of wind swept out and blew away the dust. Xueqing immediately squinted her eyes. When the wind stopped, she opened her eyes. Then, her delicate body trembled. The cold moonlight passed through the roof of the palace and fell into the main hall. The scarlet light was reflected on the walls. On the wall at the front, there was a huge magic formation that covered the entire wall. It was not the normal blue magic formation, but a scarlet one. It gave off a sense of evil, and it flashed with light like a beating heart. Cough, it's not suitable for children. Xueqing, don't look at these. Yin Nuoxing also looked at the wall in shock. He quickly covered Xueqing's Mei Mao with his palm and moved his body in front of her. His gaze shifted to the wall. Huge light blue lines flickered incessantly on the wall, rhythmically beating like a heartbeat. His gaze followed these lines, and after a long time, his gaze returned to the wall. However, there was an additional trace of seriousness in his eyes. To use an array in a palace, the person who set up the array seems too extravagant. He placed his finger under his teeth and bit it lightly. After confirming that he wasn't dreaming, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart. The light blue lines extended throughout the entire palace, from the walls to the floor. Junior sister Qing. Just as Yin Nuoxing was letting his imagination run wild, he heard a scream from afar. It came from the entrance of the hall and broke the silence of the night. Both of them were stunned. He raised his head and saw a figure rushing over. When he saw how intimate Yin Nuoxing and Xueqing were, he couldn't help but frown. He shouted, "Who are you?" He looked at the young man. He was wearing a luxurious robe. His long hair was tied up. His face was like jade. He looked like an elegant young master, but his face had a trace of coldness. The way he looked at Yin Nuoxing was filled with disdain. His posture was arrogant. "Young Master Yin, this is my senior brother, Cheng Tianxing. He's from the Li family of Yuyan City." Xueqing came on this trip because of senior brother's invitation. Xueqing said softly as she tugged on Yin Nuoxing's sleeve. Yin Nuoxing nodded and didn't say anything. Cheng Tianxing snorted in his heart when he saw how indifferent he was. He looked at Xueqing and said, "I felt the array being activated, so I rushed in. I'm relieved to see that you're fine." Xueqing shook her head and said to Yin Nuoxing, "Young Master Yin, what do you think this array is for?" She had been blindfolded the entire time, so she didn't see what the array looked like. Yin Nuoxing was taken aback. Seeing his perverted hand covering her eyes, he couldn't help but laugh embarrassedly and put down his hand. He walked to the wall and looked up at the huge array. His evil spirit revolved silently. After looking at it for a while, he said softly to Xueqing, "I don't know either. This complicated array is at least of the demonic rank." However, he was a little conservative and didn't say that it was a divine rank array. Looking at its complexity, even an ordinary demonic rank array couldn't compare. If you don't know, why are you still pretending to be a master of arrays? Before he could take a closer look, he heard a discordant snicker behind him. Oh! The veins on Yin Nuoxing's forehead stiffened. He turned around and crossed his arms. Looking at Cheng Tianxing, he said with a smile, "Master Cheng must also know about arrays. I wonder if you can give me a few pointers?" Cheng Tianxing was taken aback. He stared at Yin Nuoxing with an unfriendly gaze. The status of an array master in the god realm was comparable to that of an alchemist. It required extraordinary comprehension, the ethereal will of elements, and the personal guidance of a teacher. Only then could one become an array master. As for the will of elements, it was completely comprehended by oneself. This was something that no one could help with. Seeing that Chang Tianxing didn't speak, Yin Nuoxing curled his lips and didn't care. He turned around and looked at the huge array. His hand gently stroked the wall. Seeing that Yin Nuoxing ignored him, Chang Tianxing sneered. In Yuyan City, there weren't many people who didn't take him seriously. Even those geniuses from other places would give him some face if they knew about Yuyan City. He didn't expect to meet a black-clothed man in this shabby Yuyan pavilion who didn't even care about him. If there's nothing else, you too should hurry home. This place isn't as safe as you think. A small array slowly appeared on his hand. Xueqing and Chang Tianxing's eyes narrowed. The former seemed to be more certain. Little guy. Hearing this, Chang Tianxing's face turned as black as charcoal. Since it's dangerous, why doesn't young Master Yin come with us? Xueqing was used to it and didn't mind. Air! Yin Nuoxing's hand froze. He laughed dryly and pressed the small formation into the wall. Then, he turned his head and smiled embarrassedly. I'll leave after I finish looking at this formation. Then I'll protect young Master Yin. Xueqing smiled. As soon as she finished speaking, she took a few steps back with her sword behind her back. Mei Mao looked around vigilantly. Junior sister, who is this guy? When we came in, you, too. Chang Tianxing took a few steps forward and looked at Yin Nuoxing with displeasure as he whispered to Xueqing. Xueqing shook her head and said indifferently, I only met young Master Yin by chance. Young Master was already here before we came. In her eyes, Yin Nuoxing's injured appearance was due to the backlash of breaking the array. Young Master Yin? Chang Tianxing frowned. His charcoal face was cold. He had never heard of such a person in Yuyan City. Junior sister, then this Yuyan pavilion. After a while, his charcoal face turned bright again. It made the person in front feel strange, and the array couldn't help but tremble. As you can see, Xueqing said faintly. Her limpid eyes were filled with curiosity as she looked at Yin Nuoxing. She didn't say anything else, as if she didn't want to talk to Chang Tianxing. After a while, the array gradually disappeared with a soft hum. Yin Nuoxing also withdrew her hand. Her evil spirit eye closed automatically and only opened after a while. Young Master Yin, how is it? Xueqing came up with a hopeful look, which made Yin Nuoxing stunned. She took half a step back reflexively and only reacted after a while. She scratched her head and said in a deep voice, It was difficult. This array still contains a few types of energy that I can't control or analyze. Furthermore, it has been stained with countless fresh blood and is even more sinister. Now, I only know that this array has the ability to condense energy. I'm not too sure about the rest, so I won't say. After he finished speaking, he fell into deep thought again. His brows were knitted together. He did not explain clearly that the spirit design contained the power of space. He had felt that power countless times in Ling Hongjian and could recognize it. Along with it, there was also some energy that seemed to be connected. However, when he wanted to follow this energy to pursue it, the connection was broken again. Looking at his puzzled look, Xueqing couldn't help but smile. She said softly, Young Master Yin, there's a banquet at the Jiyuan Pavilion in the North City tomorrow. Are you going? Hearing that she invited Yin Nuoxing, Chang Tianxing's face suddenly darkened, and he couldn't help but shout, Junior sister. Banquet? Who's it for? Yin Nuoxing raised her head and saw his charred face. She couldn't help but ask. It's not specially organized by anyone. It's just a gathering of some young talents so that everyone could get to know each other. Most of them are from Yuyan City. Young Master Yin will come, right? After saying that, Xueqing narrowed her eyes at Mei Mao and looked at Yin Nuoxing charmingly. She was rather provocative. You dare shock me? This little girl. Yin Nuoxing could not help but laugh in his heart as he rolled his eyes. He looked at Chang Tianxing's dark face and then at Xueqing's hopeful little face. After pondering for a long time, he finally nodded and said, All right, Then I'll be waiting for young master's arrival tomorrow. Shu Etching covered her mouth and smiled, causing Chung Tianxing's face to darken even more. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Chapter 109. After exiting the Serene Flame Pavilion, Yin Nuoxing greeted the two of them and went straight back to the inn. Yu Yin had already fallen asleep, with a strand of sparkling hair hanging from the corner of her mouth. She was still hugging two dolls in her arms, and her blanket had been kicked to the side. He could not help but laugh at her terrible sleeping posture. He walked softly to the bedside, picked up the blanket, and gently covered her with it. He took a stool and sat on the balcony. He subconsciously crossed his legs, and an ancient book appeared in his hands. It was the Encyclopedia of Plants in the God Realm that the patriarch of the Qin family, Qin Hui, had given him. Although the title of the book was an encyclopedia of plants, when Yin Nuoxing opened it one day, what he saw was not what he had seen before. The cover of the book was still the same, but the content had changed to something related to talismans, which made him stunned for a long time. The other time, when he opened the book, he saw something about magical formations. It seemed that this book was not the encyclopedia he knew. The talismans and magical formations were very profound and difficult to understand. However, when he accidentally opened the book, it became an encyclopedia of plants, just like what he was reading now. Now that I think about it, Uncle Qin might not be a simple person. Looking at the plants written in the book, Yin Nuoxing could not help but laugh bitterly. He gently closed the book and stared at the starry sky for a long time before slowly closing his eyes. That night, Yin Nuoxing had a dream. In the dream, he stood at the edge of the sky, his red and black wings flapping gently. His evil red and black eyes stared at the sky and earth that were dyed red with blood. A nauseating smell floated in the air. There was only a very faint trace of grief and unwillingness in his eyes. His face was as hard as iron, and there was not a trace of emotion in his heart. He suddenly waved his hand, and a huge fiery red light fell from the sky and landed directly on the earth. It bloomed with the most brilliant light and illuminated the entire world. The huge fireball illuminated half of the starry sky, and the light of the stars dimmed. The sound of the sky collapsing and the earth cracking resounded in his ears. What occupied his line of sight was a field of white, and nothing could be seen clearly. Out of habit, he used his arm to cover his eyes. When the strong light faded, he moved his arm away. However, what he saw was not the ruins of the earth. Instead, he was staring at a towering tree that had appeared out of nowhere. Shock flashed across his eyes. He had seen this towering ancient tree once before. On the day he descended from the desert, the only memory that remained in his mind was this towering tree that he could not see clearly. Big brother, you said that the world tree blossoms once every era and will wither after one night. You said that for this rare sight, it will definitely return on this day. Do you still remember? Big brother, why didn't you come back this time? The world flower has already withered. This time, the flower that bloomed was white like an ice crystal. It's a pity that you didn't see it. Big brother, no matter if it's in this life, the next life, or eternity, I will definitely find you. In his daze, Yin Nuoxing saw a red-haired girl in a plain white dress walking around him. Her ethereal voice made the air much more cheerful. However, he could not see the girl's face. His instincts told him that she was a 13 or 14-year-old child. The slightly familiar voice stunned him. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to ask for the girl's name, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. The temperature on the surface of his body rose rapidly. A huge fire suddenly appeared in front of him. The entire city was ablaze at this moment. Endless flames descended from the sky. The scorching air burned his windpipe painfully. A huge black dragon roared in the sky. The flames that descended from the sky were spat out by it. The sudden situation gave Yin Nuoxing a fright, and before he could react, his body staggered and he was suddenly pushed to the ground. Yin Nuoxing turned around in shock. However, he saw a group of angry gazes. It was as if they wanted to jump out and turn into flames to burn him to ashes. Lunatic, demon, kill him. Chase him out of our city. It's you. You caused everyone's death. It's you. It's you. Voices filled with resentment, hatred, and disdain rushed into his mind like a tide. The various emotions in the voices suppressed him to the point that he could not breathe. No, it's not like that. I was just... He unconsciously wanted to open his mouth and explain himself. His movements were practiced to the point of seeming natural, but only endless curses responded to him, and his tiny and miserable voice was stirred into nothingness. I didn't, it wasn't me. Yin Nuashing curled up his body in pain. His hands covered his ears tightly, but his mouth kept muttering. However, his explanation seemed so pale and powerless, so helpless, and no one around him stood up to defend him. This is the despicable nature of humans. This time, don't you understand? An illusory voice suddenly sounded. It was so cold that it seemed to come from the underworld. It contained anger that was not inferior to the people around him. However, the source of the anger did not come from him. It came from the people around him. Yin Nuashing opened his eyes abruptly and moaned softly. Large droplets of sweat slid down his forehead. The cold moonlight shone on his handsome face that was slightly pale. A dream. It's just a dream. It seems that the blood sacrifice array I saw today made me lose control of my sleep. Yin Nuashing patted his heart, which was still in shock, and heaved a sigh of relief. He looked up at the night sky. The cool moonlight calmed him down a little. World tree, world tree, world tree. He kept muttering the name that the little girl said, afraid that this only clue would be cut off at some point. It was still late at night. Yin Nuashing murmured and casually wiped his sweat with his sleeve. He was just about to stand up when he was attracted by a dark red light. He lowered his head and saw that the book on his knees had been flipped open. The plants on it had long disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a dark red evil array. Seeing this array, he could not help but sit up straight. He gently stroked the page with his palm and felt a shocking chill. There seemed to be a terrifying, demonic power contained within it. Demonic. Speaking of which, the array I saw in the Hidden Flame Pavilion was also a little evil, but Yin Nuashing hesitantly turned back to look at the three people sleeping soundly on the bed. He took a deep breath and lowered his head to continue looking at the array. At the same time, his eyes were gradually dyed with a dreamlike color. The moment his evil spirit eye opened, his vision changed a few times. The evil array was also completely exposed to him. At this moment, he could clearly see strands of demonic aura seeping out from the array. The thousands of strands of energy lines were slowly wriggling. A wave of demonic aura rose from the book and rushed towards Yin Nuashing's forehead. In the manor in the east of Hidden Flame City, Jin Jinwang looked indifferently at the woman cultivating behind him. After a while, he casually closed the door of the secret chamber. Divine King, how is Jining? Outside the secret chamber, seeing Jin Jinwang come out, Yao Hua and the others immediately surrounded him. Their eyes flickered with worry as they asked. She's fine. This time, her injuries have healed. She can still break through another layer. Jin Jinwang shook his head. Then his eyes suddenly became sharp, causing Yao Hua and the others to shiver. He whispered, "How come you returned with serious injuries after going out for a while? I asked you to gather some information in the city. Why did you start fighting all of a sudden?" Yao Hua bitterly smiled. There have been a lot of foreign experts in Hidden Flame City recently. We were just sitting in a restaurant. I don't know where that bastard came from, but he came and challenged us. We originally wanted to ignore him, but who knew that the bastard would fight and throw all 9 of us out? Littling suffered the heaviest blow. So, he threw all 9 of you out by himself? TSK, TSK, TSK. Hearing this, the beautiful woman could not help but shake her head and let out a long sigh. Divine King, that person is a half-immortal expert. It's already not bad that we were able to escape. Mu Ling bitterly smiled. If not for Yao Hua, it would not have been a small matter. During this period of time, Hidden Flame City will not be too peaceful. What you said is only a small example. There will be an endless stream of experts coming. Be it young or old, it's fine. During this period of time, be it young or old. Don't be so ostentatious when you go out. Jin Wang solemnly said. Yes. The eight bitterly smiled. However, the matter of injuring my disciple cannot be forgotten. Jin Wang suddenly changed the topic and sneered. Divine King, what do you mean? Yao Hua hurriedly raised his head. Could it be that he was going to do it himself? Of course. You have to go and take revenge. Seeing his hopeful expression, how could Jin Wang not know what he was thinking? He rolled his eyes, causing the others to bitterly smile again. They had already been thrown back. How could they take revenge? Seeing their bitter frowns, Jin Wang raised his eyebrows and mysteriously smiled. However, if you can't beat them, you can call. Oh, who's that? Dealing with small fries below the immortal realm is not a big problem for her. Our Divine King is going to call Green Oiled Chicken to come out. The eight bitterly smiled. Tomorrow, there will be a banquet held by young people at the Gathering Fate Pavilion. If you're interested, you can go and have a look, get to know some people, and fight a few battles. Jin Wang meaningfully said. The eight solemnly nodded. Just as they were about to turn around, their expressions suddenly changed. They abruptly turned their heads and looked at the city in the distance. What a powerful demonic aura! A cry of surprise came from the beautiful woman's mouth. Then, she looked at Jin Wang and saw a trace of seriousness in each other's eyes. When did such an expert come to Yuyan City? Why didn't we hear anything about it? Jin Wang said in a low voice. There are many people in Yuyan City now. Any particularly powerful person who entered the city would be reported to him immediately. I don't know. This demonic aura is too powerful. It's not a demonic cultivator, but a demonic god. The silver-robed man's low voice contained a trace of shock. Let's go and take a look. Jin Wang slightly narrowed his eyes and grinned at the silver-robed man. Let's go. Do you think I'm afraid of you? The silver-robed man rolled his eyes. The two figures flickered and flew towards the city. Seeing the two disappear into the night sky, Yao Hua was a little embarrassed. He wiped his forehead and turned his head to look at the beautiful woman. He bitterly smiled and said, Divine King, is it really okay not to stop them? Those two old urchins will be fine. Don't worry. The beautiful woman shook her head and yawned. She turned around and walked towards the room, causing everyone to bitterly smile. Remember to take revenge. The expert you mentioned will probably go to the Gathering Fate Pavilion tomorrow. If you see Uxian, remember to say hello. The red-robed man also said hello and walked into the room. The eight bitterly smiled. What was going on? Chapter 110. In the room, Yin Nuoxing's eyes were tightly closed. After a long while, his long eyelashes trembled, and a ray of dark light shot out from his eyes. He looked at the ancient book in front of him that was closed without any movement. Only then did he raise his head, and a trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. A dream? At this moment, Yin Nuoxing's robe, which had been blown up by the demon Qi, slowly fell down. After sensing that her body did not feel any discomfort, she let out a sigh of relief. She raised the ancient book and gently flipped it open, but she did not see the array from before. It doesn't seem like, after waiting for a long time and seeing no reaction, Yin Nuoxing's face was slightly blank. Thinking back, she could see the demonic array flickering in her mind. She quickly flipped through the ancient book from beginning to end, but she did not see anything special. However, under the evil spirit eye, the ancient book emitted bits of light. At the very least, she did see talismans and arrays in the ancient book. There was no need to doubt it. Staring at the ancient book floating in front of her for a long time, Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh. She stretched out her hand and grabbed the ancient book. This time, there was nothing strange about the ancient book. The pitch-black light continued to shine for a while, then completely disappeared. It became the same as before, extremely inconspicuous. Her fingers slowly stroked the ancient book that had returned to normal. Yin Nuoxing rubbed her forehead. After a while, she bitterly laughed and softly muttered, "Forget it, I'll ask Uncle Qin when I meet him in the future." Letting out another sigh, Yin Nuashing was just about to adjust her breathing and cultivate when she suddenly raised her head and hurriedly turned around. The sound of wind breaking and a familiar aura surged from the sky. Following that, a golden figure appeared on the balcony. Looking at Yin Nuashing, he was stunned for a moment and said in surprise, "You haven't rested yet?" Her body stiffened for a moment before she slowly turned back. What appeared on her face was that delicate and pretty face. However, there was a stiff smile on her face, causing the two of them to be stunned. "Senior Divine King, what are you trying to do by barging into my room in the middle of the night?" Uxian couldn't help but smile sweetly, which made Jin Wang and the silver-robed man's body stiffen, and their faces turn pale. "Cough, it's good that you're here. Did you feel that something was wrong just now?" Jin Wang's face reddened as he hurriedly waved his hand and asked, "A powerful aura, such as devil chi or something?" Upon hearing this, Yin Nuashing was taken aback. Then, her expression turned solemn. Could it be that the array she had just come into contact with wasn't a dream? The memory of that terrifying demonic chi fluctuation was still fresh in his mind. An expert at the level of the Gold God King was very sensitive to such powerful energy fluctuations. Yin Nuashing shook her head and said, half-truthfully, "No, I just woke up and walked out. I saw the two seniors, Jin Wang was taken aback. After a while, he smiled bitterly and said, "Then it's fine. Rest early. If there's anything, come find us in the east of the city. All right, there's a gathering at the Jiuan Pavilion in the north of the city tomorrow. You should go and take a look." After he finished speaking, he looked at Yin Nuashing suspiciously. This was the place where the devil chi had dissipated. Only this place had life. Could it be that that person had already left? Yin Nuashing smiled and nodded. Jin Wang and the silver-robed man waved their hands. It wasn't good for them to stay any longer. They hurriedly jumped down from the balcony, and the former couldn't help but laugh again. After the two of them left, Yin Nuashing's face flickered, and it was replaced by an unusually solemn expression. She raised her palms slightly, and with a thought, many blue spots of light appeared on her palm. Then they slowly turned black and gradually turned into an energy matrix that intertwined with each other. In just a short moment, the demonic black array appeared in Yin Nuashing's palm. It was only the size of a palm, but a monstrous demonic aura surged out. The surge of energy gave him a fright. "Disperse." The disappearance of the origin energy in his body caused him to be even more shocked, and an icy cold word came out from his throat. He suddenly clenched his fist, and the formation instantly shrunk back into his body, transforming into surging origin energy that returned to his limbs and bones. What a terrifying consumption! Feeling the enormous energy in her body recovering, Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh of relief. She wiped the cold sweat on her forehead, raised her right hand, and stared at it in a daze. After a moment, she sighed. "Forget it. I'll see what use it has in the future." Yin Nuashing murmured a few times in his heart. His hands formed a cultivation seal, and his 6 wings slowly spread out. His body trembled slightly, and a majestic wind element lifted his body off the ground. His mood quickly calmed down, and he quickly entered a cultivation state. The next day, the 2 fiery red stars broke through the restraints of the horizon and leaped out. In an instant, the warm sunlight shone on the earth. On the balcony, the 6 wings behind the youth slowly retracted. The fierce wind also calmed down. Her pitch-black eyes suddenly opened. She took off the black robe on her body and changed into a dark black casual outfit. She put on the windbreaker that she hadn't worn in a long time. Her straight, ink-black hair spread out. That free and easy feeling that carried a hint of arrogance was the Yin Nuashing that Yin and the others were familiar with. Turning her head to look at the 3 girls who were sleeping soundly, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but smile. The arrogance that she had just gathered dissipated into nothingness. "I'm going out," she muttered to herself. When she turned her head again, she saw that cold, arrogant, and calm face of hers. Looking at the balcony, she took a step forward and jumped down. In the room, a pair of beautiful, May Mouse slowly opened her eyes. Looking at the black figure falling down, she smiled and murmured, "Be careful, idiot." In Yuyin City, other than the divine flame that was tightly sealed in the sky, the most famous thing was not the Yuyin Pavilion, but the vast forest in the north of the city. Or rather, the classical and unique manor in the forest, and the small pavilion in the manor. For many people in Yuyin City, and even the God Realm, they had only heard of the name Ju Yuan Pavilion, but had never seen it or set foot in it. It was like a legend, filled with mystery. Since ancient times, the Ju Yuan Pavilion had been a household name since the ancient era. It was not only in the Serene Flame Pavilion, but also in the Ganyuan region and the Ultimate Plain region. It was said that its traces could be found all over the realm of the gods. It was also said that only those who were determined could find it and see its true appearance. It was said that only those with a story could enter Ju Yuan Pavilion. However, the definition of this story was very vague. It seemed that because of this legend, Ju Yuan Pavilion gradually became a mysterious and sacred place. Those who were qualified to enter the manor where Ju Yuan Pavilion was located were all people of high status. Ordinary people could not even set foot in it. Perhaps this was something that the founder of Ju Yuan Pavilion did not expect. After a short, long journey, Yin Nuoxing slowly walked in the bamboo forest. Looking at the beautiful scenery in front of her, it was as if she was dealing with an otherworldly scenery. Her heart was at peace. Surrounded by green bamboos, a small bridge over flowing water, and a fresh mist floated in the air. It was intoxicating. It was hard to imagine that such a pure land lived in seclusion in the bustling Yuyin city. It was somewhat ethereal and mysterious. It made her involuntarily think of the time she spent in the Qin family. It was short and beautiful. In Ju Yuan Mountain Villa, there were scattered groups of people walking on the small path. Some of them were gathered together to drink wine and have fun. They were all people of high status. However, not many of them revealed their auras. Perhaps if you met anyone in Ju Yuan Mountain Villa, their status would be more noble than you could imagine. Adjusting her collar, Yin Nuoxing looked at the gate of the villa hidden in the thick mist. She lifted her feet slightly and walked slowly towards it. She walked slowly along the small path in the bamboo forest that was paved with bluestones. The bamboo leaves that fell with the wind slid down her body. After a while, a wide and exquisite lake appeared at the end of the bamboo forest. The lake was surrounded by bamboo forest, and it was peaceful and peaceful. Above the lake, there was a long pavilion. There were actually many figures in the pavilion. Even from afar, she could see the people dancing on the pavilion. They seemed to be very happy. Standing at the exit of the bamboo forest, Yin Nuoxing's eyes flickered a few times. She carefully observed the exquisite lakeside. The pavilion in front of her was only one of them. There were a few other pavilions on the other side of the lake. However, there was no one there, causing the entire lakeside to be very quiet. Only in front of her could she hear the occasional sound of chatter and laughter. Lifting her feet, Yin Nuoxing looked at the pavilion in front of her that had more than 10 people. She then looked at the surroundings in a daze. He was looking for Xueqing. Although he was invited here, he didn't know what to do. He stepped onto an empty maple hallway and walked to the pavilion. He looked around and saw that there was no one around. Only the pavilion in the distance was occupied. Only then did he sit down with satisfaction. "Brother, can you sit here?" Just as she sat down and was about to take out the ancient book, a gentle laughter sounded. It caused Yin Nuoxing to be stunned. She slowly turned her head around and saw a figure slowly approaching from behind. It was a young man dressed in black. His face was well-defined and the lines were beautiful. His long hair draped over his shoulders. His gentle voice was very clear and delicate. What surprised Yin Nuoxing even more was his appearance. He was as handsome as a demon. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was beautiful. He was even more beautiful than a woman. With a somewhat surprised gaze, Yin Nuoxing looked at the young man who was somewhat similar to her. She tilted her head and said indifferently, "I didn't reserve the entire pavilion. If you want to sit, then sit. You don't have to ask me." Hearing this, the young man looked at the pair of black eyes with some surprise. It seemed that he didn't expect Yin Nuashing to be so easy to talk to. After a long while, he smiled. There was even a trace of redness on his cheeks. He directly walked to the ladder's side and sat down. Bewitching man. Yin Nuashing cursed in her heart. She turned her head and stared at the calm lake. Since someone had come, she didn't intend to take out the strange book. Brother, why didn't you go to that pavilion? Why did you choose this empty pavilion? The young man looked at Yin Nuashing with interest and asked with a smile. Quiet. Yin Nuashing glanced at him. She then turned her head and looked at the spacious pavilion where more than a dozen people were standing. She didn't recognize any of them and said, What's the meaning of sitting among a group of people you don't know? You too. Why did you choose this pavilion where there is no one? Hearing the question, the young man smiled and said, I'm the same as you. There are no acquaintances. There are too many people here. This made Yin Nuashing a little surprised. She unconsciously glanced at him. The latter also looked over and smiled sweetly. This made him curse bewitching man again. In the Ju Yuan pavilion, it's fate to gather together. The world of cultivators is ever-changing. No one can say for sure when one will die. Quietly coming to this world, splashing water in the eternal river, quietly disappearing. Fate comes and goes. Countless life and death parting, joys and sorrows of separation and reunions, repeatedly meeting and parting, is the essence of life. The young man seemed to be talking to himself, which made Yin Nuashing more and more surprised. He thought that he was the only one who would think about these questions. Brother, do you think what I said is right? In the end, the young man raised his head and smiled. His eyes were shining when he looked at Yin Nuashing, which made him shudder and nod gently. Seeing this, the young man's smile became more and more brilliant. He stretched out his fair hand and said with a smile, Murong Shuegu, may I know your name? Looking at the hand that was as white as her own, Yin Nuashing also smiled. She also stretched out her hand and shook it. She said softly, Yin Nuashing. Chapter 111. Suddenly, a series of footsteps sounded behind them, accompanied by a few rough and echoing laughter, which instantly broke the tranquility of this place. It pierced into the ears of Yin Nuashing and Murong Shuegu like a piercing devil's voice, making their faces change slightly. The laughter and footsteps only lasted for a moment, and then stopped abruptly behind them. Seeing Yin Nuashing and Murong Shuegu sitting quietly in the pavilion with their backs to them, the leader of the crowd could not help but frown slightly and shouted, Get out of here! This place is reserved by me. Raising their eyebrows, Yin Nuashing and Murong Shuegu looked back at the same time. As expected, they saw a large group of handsome men and beautiful women. The leader of the group, who spoke, looked very young, about 20 years old. His long hair was hanging down casually, and he was wearing a luxurious purple and gold robe. His handsome face was like jade with a faint arrogance. His thin lips were slightly pursed, and there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. At first glance, he looked very kind, but his indifferent temperament made the two feel very disgusted. While the young man was talking, the group of people behind him had already sat down casually and looked at the three of them with interest. Yin Nuashing's eyes were as calm as water. She just took a glance and then withdrew her gaze, still staring at the calm lake, as if she did not see this person. Murong Shuegu just smiled faintly and said nothing. I told you to get out of here. Didn't you hear me? Seeing that the two of them ignored him, the young man's voice was low and cold, and there was a surge of anger in his heart. He was ignored in such a place with so many people. He, who was used to being superior, had never been treated like this before. May I ask who you are, sir? Yin Nuashing smiled faintly and folded her hands together. This place belongs to Jiyuan Villa. If the owner asks us to leave, we will leave at once. But you? We don't know each other, nor are we your servants. It's impolite to yell at each other. Didn't your mother teach you? Murong Shuegu touched her long hair and smiled faintly. The two of them echoed each other and stirred an uproar from the surrounding crowd. It also caused the expression of the young man in front of them to become gloomy. However, he gradually calmed down under his fury. Everyone in the Juyuan Mountain Villa had a noble status. If they did not possess great strength, it was likely that they had some great background behind them. Some thoughts flashed through his mind. The young man suppressed the surging killing intent in his heart and slowly glanced at Yin Nuoxing and Murong Shuegu, and then said in a very calm voice, "I was rude. Chung family, Chung, how should I address you, two young masters?" "Chung," Yin Nuoxing murmured in her heart. Although she guessed that these people were not simple, she did not expect them to be from Yuyin City's Chung family. Chung family's third young master, level 11 mortal step. In Yuyin City, Chung family is the most powerful family besides Yuyin Pavilion. It is said that the three young masters have already reached level 10 mortal step. The eldest, Chung Lin, has already stepped into half-step immortal step, and the second young master seems to have reached level 12 mortal step. The three of them together can even fight against an immortal step expert. Murong Shuegu seemed to have seen through his doubts and secretly transmitted her voice to him. "Murong Shuegu, this is Yin Nuoxing. This is Master Chung. Are you done with your probing?" Murong Shuegu said faintly. As soon as Murong Shueji's words fell, the people brought by Chung Hong could not help but burst into laughter. "Chung Hong, your name seems to be useless?" The man in an ice-blue robe could not help but pat his thigh and laugh out loud. His laughter made Chung Hong's mouth twitch, and killing intent surged in his eyes. The killing intent in his heart surged. At a certain moment, he took a step forward and swung his right hand. With a fierce gust of wind, it directly tore through the air and fiercely swung at Murong Shueji's head. His ruthless attitude caused the people behind him to exclaim in surprise. Then they began to watch with interest. Buzz! Facing Chung Hong's extremely sudden and fierce attack, Murong Shuegu did not even raise her eyes. She gently raised her right hand and was about to stretch it out when the space in front of her suddenly trembled. A blue array suddenly enlarged, and then lightly collided with Chung Hong's right fist. Immediately, a low and deep sound burst out, and then a ripple of wind spread out, and the surrounding stone benches all exploded. As soon as the fist touched the array, it separated. Murong Shuegu and Chung Hong did not move at all, and even their sitting posture did not change. On the other hand, Chung Hong staggered back a dozen steps. In this short exchange, the difference in strength between the two sides was obvious. This is an array? This kid is an array master? The formation that appeared in the air without any warning caused a trace of shock to appear in the gazes of the people in the pavilion. It was not that the rare profession of a formation master did not exist in Yuyin City, but there was no one at such a young age. Generally speaking, one had to comprehend the will of an element to become an array master. If one could comprehend the power of will at such a young age, it meant that one's comprehension and talent were even more terrifying. At Yin Nuoxing's age, anyone with a discerning eye knew that as long as he had enough time, he would definitely become a famous expert in the future, and even a god would not be a problem. Chung Hong, who steadied himself, was also shocked. He did not think that these two people were array masters at all. Moreover, judging from the level of the array, their strength seemed to be much higher than his. Seeing that everyone was looking at her, Murong Shuegu smiled and said nothing. However, she looked at Yin Nuoxing in surprise. That array was created by him. Yin Nuoxing turned his head, smiled at her, and then nodded. Murong Shuegu understood and grinned, saying, "In the future, think about your own strength before you make trouble." Those who came to the Juyuan Mountain Villa were all people of high status. If Yin Nuoxing wanted to obtain some peace during this period of time, he would have to display some of his skills. Since Chung Hong had delivered himself to his doorstep, Yin Nuoxing would naturally not allow him to leave as he pleased. It would be a pity to let go of such a person who came to slap his face. As soon as he finished speaking, the array in front of him trembled. Under everyone's gaze, it gradually separated into two other arrays. In a flash, they came to Chung Hong's side and surrounded him in a triangular formation. Chung Hong paused and looked at Murong Shuegu. Murong Shueji's eyes were also flashing with killing intent. "What do you want?" "This is Juyuan Villa. No one is allowed to die in the villa. You should know this rule. Feeling the killing intent in Murong Shueji's eyes, Chung Hong's face changed slightly and said, "Take 3 of our attacks. If you can take it, you can leave. If you can't, you can stay." Murong Shuege turned around and sat down, saying lightly. The surrounding people looked at the 3 arrays that were about 10 feet in size. Their faces suddenly became dignified. The means of array masters were extremely terrifying. Although the array was just standing there, no one knew what it was used for. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Nuoxing also slowly turned around. His dark eyes looked at Chung Hong indifferently and said lightly, "Should I go first or together?" When Chung Hong saw Yun Nuoxing's indifferent look, he was also stunned for a long time. Immediately, anger surged in his heart. He looked at Murong Shuege and sneered, "I can take 3 of your attacks. You don't have to take out a scapegoat. Otherwise, you'll get into trouble when you're killed." Murong Shuege shrugged. Yin Nuoxing ignored Chung Hong. He tilted his head and smiled at Murong Shuege. "Let's fight. Let's fight." Murong Shuege grinned and clenched his hands. Suddenly, his bones burst out with a crackling sound. His figure flashed, and he rushed toward Chung Hong. "One attack," Yin Nuoxing murmured. He put his left hand's middle finger and thumb together and rubbed hard. An energy light beam shot out from one of the arrays. The vigorous energy made the surrounding people's faces change dramatically. Yuan power broke out from his body. Before Chung Hong could think of anything, the energy light pillar had already reached his body. Soon after, an earth-shattering and frightening energy poured out like a torrential flood. Puchi, the do-chi that lingered over the surface of his body, was directly torn apart under the frightening energy of the energy light pillar. The concentrated energy landed on his chest. Immediately, a mouthful of fresh blood was spat out explosively in front of the many stunned gazes around him. The blood condensed into a blood mist in midair. Chung Hong's body was like a sandbag that had been hit hard. He flew backward stiffly. Before he could stop, a blurry figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was Murong Shuege. "One attack." Murong Shuege said the same in different words. She clenched her fist and smashed it toward Chung Hong's waist. Pong! The muffled sound of flesh colliding caused everyone to tremble violently. Chung Hong's body flew out like a spinning top and smashed onto the ground, shattering all the stone benches along the way into powder. After flying back for more than 10 meters, he finally violently collided with a huge pillar of the long pavilion. Immediately, the entire long pavilion began to tremble slightly. The entire place was silent. Everyone's gazes were focused on Yun Nuoxing. It turned out that the person who had been sitting there without moving was the magic array master. At this moment, most people had labeled the smiling faces of the two as dangerous. One really could not judge a book by its cover in this Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. After sending Chung Hong flying with 1 attack, Yin Nuoxing did not stop there. She waved her hand gently, and the 3 magic arrays merged into one. Immediately, the light on the magic array surged. Another thick energy light beam violently shot toward the seriously injured Chung Hong. Murong Shueji's body flashed and rushed toward the former. 2 attacks. Seeing the actions of the two, horror flashed across Chung Hong's eyes. He cried out loudly, "Bing Xiao, save me!" His voice had just sounded when Murong Shueji's body flashed like a swallow. Just as her fist and energy light beam were about to strike, a clear and indifferent laughter suddenly sounded in the pavilion. "Huh, these 2 friends, why do you need to be so heavy-handed? You can't see blood in Ju Yuan Mountain Villa." As the laughter faded, an icy blue figure suddenly flashed out like a ghost. Then, it appeared in front of Chung Hong. It stretched out both hands and made a grabbing motion in the air. Soon after, it spun violently. Murong Shueji's body slid past him and almost fell into the lake. The energy light beam also twisted and swept past her. Murong Shuege stabilized her body. A cold look appeared on her elegant face. The tip of her foot touched the lake, and her body suddenly rushed toward the blue-clothed person who had appeared. Yin Nuoxing's mind also moved. The magic array split into three. Dozens of dark chains shot out from it and rushed toward the blue-clothed person. Seeing Murong Shuege and the chains rushing toward him, the blue-clothed person smiled faintly. His hands once again spun in the air. His palms stretched out and swept toward the chains. The chains suddenly changed their trajectory and were all pointed at Murong Shuege. Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He suddenly grabbed the chain with his palm, and the chain rushed to Murong Shuege and wrapped around her palm. With the help of her strength, the chain violently attacked the man in blue. The latter also understood and increased the strength in his hand. An ethereal aura slowly spread out. Seeing this, the blue-clothed person slightly exerted force with the tip of his foot. His body was half-turned, and his hands were grabbing at Murong Shuege. Then, using the force of his body's rotation, he suddenly threw her out. This blue-clothed person seemed to be able to shift the attack. Moreover, he could grab Murong Shuege's body from a distance. Looking at his grabbing and pushing, it seemed gentle, but the power contained in it was strange and fierce. If it weren't for the chains circling around, Murong Shuege would at least be forced to retreat. She might even be injured. In the air, Murong Shuege was thrown out. It was very difficult for her to move. She was actually restrained. However, just when the blue-clothed person was about to throw her out, the chains suddenly became stiff and pulled Murong Shuege backward. A black shadow also flashed out strangely. 5 fingers suddenly clenched. Immediately, pieces of talismans condensed on the tip of the fist and blasted out fiercely. The fist collided with the strange power of the palm, bursting out layers of dull sounds. As the strong wind spread, the blue-clothed person actually retreated more than a dozen steps. Yin Nuoxing also took advantage of this force to retreat. She landed on the top of the pavilion. The chains also pulled Murong Shuege to stand there. After standing firm, Yin Nuoxing raised her head and looked at the blue-clothed person. Her dark eyes were still very calm. It's not a good habit to interfere in other people's business. Didn't anyone teach you that? Chapter 112. The blue-robed man who appeared in front of Cheng Hong was very young. He looked about the same age as Murong Shuege. His ice-blue robe fluttered in the wind, giving him a sense of elegance. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and wisps of ethereal aura wrapped around his body. There was a trace of heroic spirit in his elegant face. This blue-robed man was the one who said that Cheng Hong's name was useless. The battle here also attracted the attention of the people of Jiuan Mountain Villa. The sound of wind breaking rang out from all directions. Dozens of figures suddenly appeared by the lakeside. When they saw the man, they seemed to be a little surprised. Bing Ling, the divine son of Ice in Snow Mountain Villa. I heard that Bing Ling is not even 25 years old, but he is already a half-immortal. With such strength, there are few rivals among the younger generation. I didn't expect that even the people of Divine Prefecture would come. It seems that the matter of Purple Night Flame has really attracted a lot of attention. Hearing the whispers coming from the surroundings, Yin Nuoxing's heart moved. His slightly narrowed eyes slightly swept across the body of the blue-clothed man opposite him. Seeing the strands of milky white, icy cold aura circling around his body, he was a little surprised in his heart. Other than the immortal rank experts he had seen in the Red Star Academy, this person was probably the youngest half-immortal expert he had ever seen. Of course, Yao Hua and the others also had excellent cultivation talent. Although the 9 of them had not reached the immortal step, they were younger than the blue-robed man in front of him. No one could be sure whether they could reach the immortal step in a few years. If they really wanted to compare, their talent was actually not much weaker than the blue-robed man in front of him. But in any case, to reach the half-immortal step at such a young age, he was definitely a dragon among men. Just based on this point, Bing Ling had the right to be arrogant. While Yin Nuoxing was surprised by the blue-clothed man's strength, tempestuous waves arose in the blue-clothed man's heart as well. After the quick exchange of blows from before, He was able to know that the strength of this extremely young youth before him wasn't inferior to him. This caused him to feel slightly displeased in his heart. Since he was young, he'd received the full support of his seniors, and it could even be said that they'd taught him everything in order to allow him to attain his current height. It was all for the sake of allowing him to pass through the mortal rank as soon as possible so that he could officially step into the immortal rank. Only by reaching the celestial level would one's path of cultivation officially begin. Reaching the half-celestial level before the age of 25 was the thing he was most proud of. Looking at the ice and snow mountain villa, many people at this age were still struggling in the mortal level. Their future potential was far inferior to his. However, the pride in his heart was beaten down by someone today. Not to mention the black-clothed youth. The demonic youth strength wasn't much weaker than his. If it weren't for his special technique, he was afraid that he would have been played to death by the two of them. Such a comparison made him feel very frustrated. Of course, this feeling of frustration only lasted for a moment before disappearing without a trace. No matter what, he was able to step into the half-immortal step before the age of 25 and even reach the immortal rank. This was enough to prove his excellence. This friend is too serious. If I didn't do anything, I'm afraid that Cheng Hong would have been killed by you. You can't see blood in the Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. I think you know that, Bing Ling said with a smile as he waved his sleeve gently, cupping his hands in salute to Yun Nuoxing and Yun Nuoxing. Then why didn't you stop us at the beginning? Why are you stopping us now? Yun Nuoxing didn't express his opinion. He looked at Murong Shuegu and said, "Are you okay?" Murong Shuegu shook her head and said lightly, "Unfortunately, I should have used my full strength in that punch just now. I didn't kill him." Yun Nuoxing nodded and looked at Bing Ling again, saying, "Or you can represent the Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. So you came to stop us?" After a pause, he said, "If not, then please step aside." Seeing Yun Nuoxing pressuring him, Bing Ling's eyes turned cold. A wisp of cold and ethereal qi flowed slowly, but the smile on his face became brighter. "Friend, it's just a small conflict. It's fate that we can meet in the Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. This is just a small matter. Please let it go for my sake, okay?" Yun Nuoxing's eyes swept over Cheng Hong, who was struggling to get up and glaring at him, and Murong Shuegu with hatred. Killing intent rose in his heart. This person's cultivation was higher than his. Although he wasn't very strong, he was indeed a dangerous person. Moreover, he was a member of the Chung family in Yuyan City. Now that they had enmity with each other, if they let him go, it would be a big trouble. He had already experienced it once in Divine Weapon City. But if he wanted to take Cheng Hong's life now, Bing Ling in front of him would definitely intervene. Moreover, there was also the Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. He had never heard that this mysterious villa had an owner, but he had always been afraid of it. If he took action forcefully, he didn't know what the consequences would be. Fate can also be divided into evil and good. After a long sigh, Yun Nuoxing raised his head and said lightly, "Who are you to me? Why do I have to give you face for anything I do? So, Your Excellency, you have to take action?" Seeing that Yun Nuoxing didn't give him any face, the smile on Bing Ling's face completely disappeared. He looked at Yun Nuoxing with cold and calm eyes. "Don't be impulsive. Ju Yuan Mountain Villa can't see blood. This rule has existed since ancient times. No one knows what will happen if someone dies here. There have been a few cases before, and those people all ended very miserably." Murong Shuegu gently pulled Yun Nuoxing, shook her head, and said lightly. Looking at Murong Shuegu, who was smiling faintly, Yun Nuoxing sighed and nodded. He said lightly to Cheng Hong, "You're lucky. Next time, you'd better consider whether you have the ability to cause trouble." Hearing the same words, the corner of Cheng Hong's eyes twitched rapidly. He gritted his teeth, and the hatred in his eyes became even more intense. "Hee, thank you, Brother Murong, for resolving the trouble." Bing Ling saw this, and his smile returned. He cupped his hands and smiled at Murong Shuegu. However, Murong Shuegu just glanced at him indifferently, sneered in a low voice, and then withdrew her gaze. We shouldn't stay here for long. Let's go first, Murong Shuegu said softly to Yin Nuashing. Then she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and floated backward, landing in the bamboo forest. Okay, Yin Nuashing nodded and followed. Master Bing, are we letting them go just like that? Looking at Yin Nuashing and Murong Shueji's figures, Cheng Hong wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said to Bing Ling angrily, "What else can we do? Yin Nuashing's formation is very difficult to deal with. And that Murong Shuege, I'm not sure about her strength, but I don't think she's much weaker than me. If the two of them work together, they won't even be afraid of a half-immortal." The smile on Bing Ling's face slowly disappeared. He said coldly, "You can't fight in Juyuan Mountain Villa, but they can't stay in there. Your family is in Yuyan City. When they leave Juyuan Mountain Villa," then after he finished speaking, he waved his hand in front of him. Cheng Hong's expression froze. He clenched his teeth and nodded fiercely. "Let's find out their background first. As long as they're still in Yuyan City, it won't be a problem. Most of the people who come here are here for the Purple Night Flame. If the Chung family can't deal with them, we'll deal with them when the experts of Icy Snow Mountain Villa come." Bing Ling smiled coldly. He waved his hand in the direction where Yin Nuashing and Murong Shui disappeared. He murmured in his heart, "Although Master told us not to cause trouble, they came to us themselves." Yin Nuashing and Murong Shui landed in the bamboo forest. When they turned around and saw that the lake was hidden in the bamboo forest, their footsteps gradually slowed down. They looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. "Young Master Yin," a clear and beautiful voice sounded out from behind him. Yin Nuashing turned his head around, only to see a fairy-like beauty dressed in white slowly walking towards him. The long sword at her slender waist gently swayed. Xueqing. Seeing her, Yin Nuashing finally breathed a sigh of relief. He took 2 steps forward and said with a smile, "I've been waiting for you at Juyuan Mountain Villa for a long time. I thought you abandoned me without a word." "Who abandoned you?" Xueqing muttered softly. Mei Mao glanced at Murong Shuegu and said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to come so early, but it seems like I was right to come late. I've made friends in such a short time." Yin Nuashing shrugged and pulled Murong Shuegu over. He said, "This is Xueqing, and this is Murong Shuegu. Don't be fooled by his appearance. He's actually a man." The last sentence was obviously directed at Xueqing. Murong? Hearing this name, Xueqing seemed to have thought of something. She looked at Murong Shuegu in surprise. Murong Shuegu blinked at her, and his mouth moved. Then he nodded. What's wrong with Murong?" Seeing her enlightened look, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but be stunned. He turned around and saw Murong Shuegu looking at him with a smile. His smile was more beautiful than a woman's. He shuddered and scolded, "Vixen, you came at just the right time. It's my fault for not telling you the time when I told you. The main event is just about to begin," Xueqing said softly as she led Yin Nuashing and Murong Shuegu on a winding path. "You're familiar with this place?" Seeing that Xueqing seemed to know the way, Yin Nuashing was slightly surprised. She didn't seem to be from Yuyan City, but walking here felt like she was taking a stroll in the back garden. "I've been to Juyuan Mountain Villa in Yuyan City a few times." Xueqing turned around and smiled. "To be honest, young Master Yun, even my Ice Snow Mountain Villa covets the Purple Night Flame." "Wait, Xueqing, you're from the Ice Snow Mountain Villa?" Yin Nuashing's footsteps paused. His body stiffened as he looked at Xueqing in astonishment. He remembered that Bing Ling was also from the Ice Snow Mountain Villa. Were the two of them the same? "Yes, what's wrong?" Xueqing nodded. "Is there someone called Bing Ling in your Ice Snow Mountain Villa?" Yin Nuashing asked with a strange expression. "He's the godson of Ice Snow Mountain Villa." Xueqing seemed to have thought of something and suddenly laughed. Yin Nuashing was confused. After a while, he said, "So, the one confronting the godson is young Master Yin. You saw it?" Yin Nuashing scratched his head and felt a little unnatural. He had gotten into a fight with the godson of Ice Snow Mountain Villa, and now he was talking to another disciple. How could he explain this relationship? "Yes, young Master Yin, don't worry. Even if you cripple him, I will pretend that I didn't see it." As if she knew what he was thinking, Xueqing waved her hand and said. Hearing her fierce words, Yun Nuoxing was slightly stunned. He was about to ask, but seeing that she didn't seem to want to talk about it, he closed his mouth and followed her silently. Shuege, do you know Xueqing? Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but ask Murong Shuege through telepathy. Snow Fairy's name is quite famous in the Divine Prefecture. Even in Yuyan City, because of her appearance many times, she's also a little famous here. Don't you know? Murong Shuege glanced at Xueqing and whispered through telepathy. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and shook his head. Seeing him shake his head, Murong Shuege smiled and said through telepathy, "You'll know. By then, we won't have to explain. But I want to know now." Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. It was really hard for him to be so mysterious. His heart was like being scratched by a cat, and his soul of gossip was burning fiercely. However, the two of them seemed to have a tacit understanding and kept quiet, leaving him anxious. Chapter 113. Just as Yun Nuoxing was unable to hold back her thirst for gossip, Xueqing led the two of them out of the bamboo forest. The scenery before their eyes changed as if the stars had changed. What appeared before their eyes was a huge lake. 8 sandalwood corridors extended from the lakeside, sticking close to the surface of the lake and extending to the small island in the middle of the lake. The 8 corridors gathered together and surrounded the small island, as if 8 giant dragons had trapped it. A small mountain stood on the small island. It was an ordinary small mountain that was less than 1,000 feet tall. A mahogany pavilion stood on the peak of the mountain. That was the highest point in the Juyuan Mountain Villa, and one could see the entire mountain villa with a single glance. One could also see the Yuyan city outside the bamboo forest. However, very few people were able to reach it. It smells so good. It smells like wood. His nose twitched a few times. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and then exhaled a long breath before saying, "Is that so? I smelled it the first time I came here." Xueqing smiled and said, "This is the heart of Juyuan Mountain Villa, Juyuan Lake. On top of the small mountain in the middle of the lake is the legendary Juyuan Pavilion. The wood fragrance that young Master Yun smelled came from this pavilion. No one knows how long it has existed, but it still emits a fragrance that makes people feel at ease. It's a pity that I've been here many times, but I've never been able to step on it." She shook her head regretfully. "Why? I don't see anything strange about it. Isn't it just climbing a mountain?" Yun Nuoxing tilted her head and asked curiously. Seeing her fearless look, Xueqing and Murong Shuege smiled bitterly and shook their heads. The latter sighed and said, "It's not that easy. Rumor has it that only those with stories can set foot on that sacred place. However, countless years have passed, and no one can say what that story means." "In other words?" Yun Nuoxing scratched her head and stuck her tongue out. She looked at the two of them in a daze. Young Master Yun will know when he makes a trip up there," Xueqing said mysteriously as she shrugged. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes and looked at the heart-gathering lake. The 8 long corridors were empty, but there were many people gathered at the lakeside. However, to his surprise, there wasn't much noise here. There weren't any demonic sounds that he had imagined. It was as if the crowd was speaking softly. "Let's go take a look." Xueqing turned her head to the side and smiled at Yun Nuoxing. Her handsome face was charming, and Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but take a few more glances before nodding. In less than a minute, they arrived at the lakeside. Only when they were close to the crowd could they hear what they were saying. Yun Nuoxing, who had been looking around, suddenly froze in her tracks. Xueqing and Yun Ruoyan, who had been walking forward, turned back and realized that one person was missing. They were stunned as well. Sweeping their gazes, they saw his stiff body and hurriedly jogged back to him, calling out softly, "Young Master Yun." "Young Master." Hearing the call, Yun Nuoxing came back to his senses. Seeing the two of them looking at him worriedly, he blushed and coughed dryly. He turned his gaze to the other side and said with an embarrassed smile, "Can I go over there a little bit?" Xueqing followed his gaze, but couldn't find the person he was looking at. She asked curiously, Did you meet someone you know? Uh, about that. Someone I know. I guess you can say that. I know. Yin Nuashing laughed dryly. After stuttering for a while, she turned around and walked over. Xueqing and Murong Shuego looked at each other and quickly followed her. After walking for a distance, the two of them stopped. Their footsteps slowed down along with Yin Nuashing. They also saw that in front of them, not far from a sandalwood corridor, 9 young people were gathered together. Their expressions seemed a little gloomy. The people around them kept a distance from them. They seemed to be afraid and in awe. Divine King is a liar. He said that Yusin would come to Ju Yuan Mountain Villa. I even came up with a script. Now it's going to rot in my stomach. The young man in a bright white robe sighed and said while shaking his head, "When Sister Yusin sees you, she won't even listen to you and will slap you out." The girl in a bright green robe rolled her eyes at him and muttered, "I think Yusin knows that boss is here. She will take a detour or turn a blind eye." The sturdy man in a silver blue robe nodded. His eyebrows were knitted together. "Boss, you should go and apologize to Sister Goddess. Although I don't expect you to have any good karma with her, don't let it turn into an ill-fated relationship." Her fiery red hair draped over her shoulders. Her small face was calm. She looked at the young man calmly and couldn't help but shake her head. Yes, I agree." The others nodded in agreement. As for these 9 people, Yin Nuashing said that he was familiar with them. He had met them a few times, chatted with them, fought with them, and played with them. Other than a certain person who didn't see eye to eye, he could chat with them. If he said that he didn't know them. After all, radish, green vegetables, and chicken stew knew Yusin and not him, Yin Nuashing. Therefore, it was a little tricky now should he go up and say hello or turn around and leave. Yin Nuashing sighed in distress. Seeing that Mu Ling and the others were looking for him, looking for Yusin, it seemed like they had something to do. But now what should he do? Seeing the 9 people, Xueqing frowned and muttered, "The people from the 9 Elements Shrine, they really came to." Yin Nuashing was stunned. He looked at her and moved his mouth close to her ear like a thief. "You know them." The hot wind blowing by her ear made Xueqing's delicate body tremble. However, it wasn't obvious and Yin Nuashing didn't see it. Her beautiful face blushed and she nodded. She shyly glared at him and spoke in an even softer voice, "The little divine king of the 9 Elements Shrine." Not to mention the 4 main regions. Who doesn't know him in the entire divine continent? It's expected that the people from the 9 Elements Shrine would come. The news of the Purple Night Flame has spread far and wide. We're not afraid that they won't come. If they don't come, our chances will be even smaller. We can compete with anyone but the 9 Elements Shrine. If we provoke one of them, the 9 Elements Shrine will jump out. Murong Shuegu also smiled bitterly. It seemed that there was no stronger alliance than these 9 forces in the world, especially the people from the Light Shrine. That Yaohua, we don't know how strong he is now. If he can reach the speed of light, the winner of this competition for the Purple Night Flame should be the 9 Elements Shrine. Xueqing shook her head and said in a deep voice, "There will always be people who dare to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. The temptation of the Purple Night Flame is very great. In addition to increasing one's strength, this divine flame also comes with a domain. However, we don't know the specific effects. After all, the ones that we really need to guard against are not those behemoths. The rogue cultivators are the most powerful variables in this game. If they snatch something and go deep into the mountains and forests, who can find them except for the divination masters?" Murong Shuega nodded. Yin Nuashing looked at the two in astonishment. When he stood with Jin Wang and the others, he didn't think about this. Today, when Xueqing and Murong Shuegu saw the people from the 9 Elements Shrine, they looked dignified, as if they had seen a god. This made him speechless. Did they have such a great influence? Sigh. Just as the 3 of them were frowning, Yao Hua's group of 9 sighed heavily at the same time. Their loud sighs startled the surrounding people, and they hastily retreated a few steps. They didn't know what had happened, but the 3 of them were startled. While the crowd was retreating, Yin Nuashing and the other 2 didn't move. Instead, they moved forward and entered the line of sight of Yao Hua and the other 8 people. They also looked around curiously, but sighed and took a step back. Finally, they fixed their eyes on the three people and raised their eyebrows slightly. Immediately, Yao Hua lifted his foot and walked towards them. The other 8 people also seemed to have seen something and followed him. Seeing the 9 people walking towards them together, Yun Nuoxing looked a little unnatural. She pretended to look into the distance and quietly took a step back, hiding behind Morong Shuego. She kept looking around but didn't turn around. When the crowd saw Yao Hua and the other 8 people walking, they quickly made way for them. In this way, Yun Nuoxing and the other 2 who didn't move stood out, making the latter break out in cold sweat. After a while, Yao Hua and the other 8 people stood half a foot in front of Xueqing. He looked at the latter with his dark eyes, and the latter stared back at him indifferently. Xue Fairy, I didn't expect to see you here today. I wonder how Xue Ming King is doing recently. The Divine King asked us to send his regards. Oh, by the way, I want to beat up your Divine Son. Do you have any objections? Yao Hua suddenly grinned and blabbered. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. The atmosphere wasn't like this just a moment ago. Thank you for your concern, Divine King and Divine Son. My master is in good health and has been meeting with old friends in Ganyuan Domain. My master said that if I see you, I should greet you properly. Xueqing shook her head with a faint smile and said, Also, although Bingling and I are both from Ice Mountain Manor, he is not from my family. If you want to beat him up, you don't have to ask me. Although the conversation was calm, there was a hint of tit for tat. Yin Nuoxing was a little embarrassed. Did they have a good relationship or bad relationship? Or did they have no relationship at all? Yao Hua asked about Xue Ming King's whereabouts the moment he opened his mouth, and Xueqing also brushed it off casually. What's the relationship between you two? Yin Nuoxing wiped the sweat off her forehead and couldn't help but transmit her voice to Xueqing. Nothing special. My master knows the Divine King of 9 Deities Palace, but we young people don't have any friendship. Xueqing smiled and transmitted her voice back. Young Master Morong, may I know who the friend behind you is? Yao Hua looked at Morong Shuege and smiled faintly. Yin Nuoxing's face stiffened and turned pale. What the hell? Why did she mention him for no reason? Poking Morong Shuege with her palm, Yin Nuoxing pretended that her throat was itchy and coughed softly. Hearing this cough, Morong Shuege rolled her eyes and seemed to know what it meant. She nodded slightly and flicked Yin Nuoxing's back with her finger behind her back. Then she smiled and said, This is young Master Yin. We just met him. As he was not familiar with Juyuan Mountain Manor, he asked us for directions. So we brought him along. Young Master Yin. Hearing this, Yao Hua, Mu Ling, and the others all murmured softly. Then they frowned slightly. In this Yuyin city, there seemed to be no force with the surname Yun, nor was there any expert with the surname Yun. Seeing the silence of the 9 people, Yun Nuoxing suddenly shuddered. She hurriedly grabbed Xueqing's wrist and pointed at it randomly. Fairy, Xue, is that Bingling? I want to settle the score with him. Then, without waiting for the others to reply, she ran away. Xueqing and Mu Ling, who turned around in surprise, saw her running away. They looked at each other in astonishment, not knowing what had happened. After a while, they nodded at Yao Hua and the others. Then we'll leave first. See you later. Then, they hurriedly chased after Yin Nuoxing. The wood spirit was also puzzled as she looked at the black figure running away. She looked at the black figure with long, black hair fluttering in the wind and his windbreaker fluttering in the wind, giving off a free and easy feeling. She was also a little flustered. A fiery red figure from her memories suddenly appeared in front of her and gradually merged with the figure in front of her. Her beautiful eyes suddenly widened, and she couldn't help but mutter, Little sister Yuexin. Hey. Where? Hearing this murmur, Yao Hua suddenly turned around. Seeing her astonished expression, he hurriedly followed her gaze. However, Yin Nuoxing had already disappeared into the crowd. Even if she appeared in his line of sight, he might not be able to recognize her. Sister Mu Ling, did you see wrongly? Looking in the direction Mu Ling was looking for, Huoji also shook her head. She didn't see the fiery red figure in her memory. Hearing this, Mu Ling frowned. The image of Yin Nuoxing's black figure running away was imprinted in her mind. After comparing it with the fiery red figure, she also shook her head and said with a bitter smile, I saw her wrongly. It seems that I miss her a little. It's only been a few days since I last saw her. After all, she's the first friend I made in my life. In various ways. Hua Ji nodded and said in agreement. Back then, the God King said to follow Sister Yuexin on a trip, but you refused, Shui Xia said faintly. Her porcelain doll-like little face looked at the two of them with disdain. Oh, little Xia wants to travel with Sister Yuexin? Do you want me to tell the Water God King? Mu Ling raised her eyebrows and smiled evilly. Shui Xia fiercely shivered and her little head shrank back. Her petite body quickly hid behind Lei Ming, and her entire person disappeared from the wood spirit's line of sight. Following that, a weak voice sounded out. Actually, I also really miss you, Ixen. The 9 people smiled bitterly. What the hell was this? Chapter 114. Yin Nuoxing stopped after running for an unknown amount of time. Looking at the sandalwood corridor in front of him, he was a little confused. He didn't know where he had run to. When he looked back, the 9 figures had disappeared. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. Young Master Yin, why did you suddenly run? Did you offend the people of 9 Shrine? A moment later, Xueqing, who had followed him all the way here, stopped beside him. She took a small breath, and her voluptuous breasts heaved up and down. Drawing an elegant arc, Yin Nuoxing stared at her and hurriedly shook his head. Offend? No. How could I have offended them? They offended me, no. They even wanted to keep me by their side so they could study me. It's not like that. The more he spoke, the more confused he became. Yin Nuoxing's mind was in a mess, especially when he heard the murmur of the wood spirit. It was so clear that he almost had a heart attack. So, you have some entanglements with 9 Shrine, and now you want to hide from them? Patting Yin Nuoxing's shoulder, Murong Shuego shook her head and sighed. Brother, although I'm very curious about what happened between you two, if you don't want to talk about it, we won't ask. Well, if you can climb the big ship of 9 Shrine, you'll have a meteoric rise. Your future will definitely be much smoother. From what you're saying, it seems like you're saying, if I wasn't a member of XX, I would have already gone to 9 Shrine to cultivate. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Was 9 Shrine so powerful? Aya, look at what you're saying. Murong Shuego waved her hand embarrassedly. Her coquettish look made Yin Nuoxing want to slap her. Actually, that's what I meant. Murong Shuego nodded without hesitation and said, 9 Shrine has been passed down since ancient times. For countless years, 9 Shrine has been studying the corresponding elements. In the realm of the gods, when it comes to the understanding of elements, no one dares to claim to be first if 9 Shrine claims to be second. Moreover, 9 Shrine has a unique method to let people comprehend the will of elements. This is something that other forces can't do. Some people can't comprehend the will of their elements, even when they reach the level of God. The power of will has always been the most troublesome thing for people. They can only rely on themselves to comprehend it. Xueqing also said softly with undisguised admiration in her voice. Doesn't that mean that everyone in 9 Shrine is an array master? Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing was a little shocked. The first requirement to be a magic array master was to comprehend the will of one's own element. That kind of will changed according to one's will. Different people would comprehend the power of will differently. Of course not. Xueqing shook her head with a smile and said, the most difficult thing to be an array master is to comprehend it. If you don't have enough comprehension, you won't be able to become an array master. Even if 9 Shrine has a heavenly method to help people comprehend the will of elements, it's impossible to mass produce array masters. If it's as you think, no force in the realm of the gods can compete with them. But this method is enough to scare people. Those who comprehend the will of elements have stepped into a new level. So, Nuoxing, you're standing at a higher starting point than most people. If I'm not mistaken, no one can compete with you in this era. Ordinary people comprehend the power of will when they're in the immortal realm. The special ones are in the half-immortal realm. They can start to temper their elements and slowly come in contact with the original state of their elements. The fastest recorded person to comprehend the will of elements when he's in the half-immortal realm. Morong Shuego looked at Yin Nuoxing and said with a faint smile. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and said, "Don't tease me." He didn't know what it meant, but he instinctively felt that the way he used the elements was different from the way others used the elements. However, he couldn't tell what the difference was. I'm indeed in a bit of entanglement with Nine Shrine, but it's not a big deal. Don't worry, we won't fight. Waving his hand, Yin Nuoxing said with a smile. He did not say that the Nine Deities Hall had been looking for him all this time. That way, he would be recognized. A few years ago, the matter of the Nine Deities Hall and the two great clans looking for him was already known to everyone. While the three of them were talking, the sound of wind breaking could be heard in the sky above the heart-gathering lake. Then, dozens of figures suddenly appeared in the empty sky. These figures didn't stay in the sky for long and descended to the lakeside. Huh? Yin Nuoxing raised his eyes slightly and looked at the sky not far away. He let out a puzzled sound. In the sky, an icy blue robe fluttered in the wind. The leader was a man with a refined face and a heroic spirit. It was Bing Ling. However, at this time, there was another young man beside him. He looked to be about the same age as Bing Ling, but just by standing in the void, he seemed to bring a sense of oppression to the world. Wow, what a grand style! How come even deities have come? Shouldn't they be staring at the purple night dark flame? Yao Hua placed his palm on his forehead and looked around. Looking at the group of newcomers, he was somewhat astonished. Purple night flame can be seen everywhere in the huge Yuyin city. Well, she shook her head and frowned. She muttered, "But I didn't receive any news about which side's experts are coming." Yao Hua. While the few of them were stunned, a clear laughter sounded beside Yao Hua. Soon after, the space beside him began to fluctuate slightly. A moment later, a crack appeared. Behind it, three figures swiftly scuttled out. The crack in space also slowly disappeared. The three of them moved so quickly that no one could see what had happened here. Divine King, why are you suddenly here? Yao Hua and the others were surprised when they saw Jin Wang and the other two. What's wrong? You guys are allowed to have fun, but we old fellows can't? The Gold God King glared at him. Yao Hua smiled bitterly. What fun was this? The Gold God King waved his hand, and with a flick of his right hand, a black object appeared between his two fingers. He looked at the black object and said, "Not long after you left this morning, we received an invitation to the Gathering Fate Pavilion. However, there was no name on the invitation, so we don't know who it is. We don't know many people in the Sourcepeak region, and they are very far from Yuyin City." Invitation? Yao Hua was taken aback. Yes, but it seems that we're not the only ones who receive an invitation. Jin Wang nodded. His golden eyes scanned the surroundings and paused for a moment on the gods. After looking around, he looked at Yao Hua and said, "Where's Yusin? That girl didn't come?" Hearing him mention Yusin, the 9 people smiled bitterly and shook their heads. They lowered their heads like children who had done something wrong. Forget it. She's probably still talking about the Divine Weapon Array in the Divine Weapon Palace and has gone into seclusion. Since that's the case, you guys can settle your own matters, Jin Wang said indifferently. The 9 people smiled bitterly. Yin Nuoxing looked at Jin Wang and the others. He took a step back and his face twitched. Why are they here too? Master! Beside him, Xueqing cried out in surprise, causing his heart to jump. He hurriedly turned around and saw that a young man had unknowingly appeared. He was dressed in snow-white robes and gave off a carefree feeling. Master, didn't you go to the Ganyuan region to meet Senior Uncle and the others? Xueqing and Mei Mao were surprised and in disbelief. The Ganyuan region and the Taiyuan region were separated by a great distance. She couldn't understand how the young man came here. Could it be that Master had come directly to Yuyin City? After the initial surprise, Yin Nuoxing relaxed. After taking a closer look, he keenly sensed something and couldn't help muttering, "No, this is a soul incarnation." Hearing this, Xueqing, Morong Shuega, and the young man in white looked at him in surprise. Then the latter smiled and looked at him approvingly. Not bad, little guy, but you can see through my soul incarnation at the mortal level. My real body is indeed in the Ganyuan region. I was worried about you during this trip to Yuyan City, so I came with you in this way. The young man smiled. Yin Nuoxing saw a trace of vicissitudes in his eyes. This person, like Jin Wang and the others, was also an old monster who had lived for God knows how many years. The eyes of the young man flashed with sharpness as he swept his gaze over the surroundings. Finally, his gaze landed on the gold God King and the other two. His gaze softened as he nodded to the three of them. The gold God King gave him a thumbs up as he grinned and nodded. Okay, I showed myself to intimidate those who have bad intentions. They have also noticed me, so I will continue to hide. Call me if you need anything, or go find that bastard old Jean. The young man smiled and patted Xueqing's head. Then his body trembled and gradually disappeared. A nearly transparent mark slowly fell and floated into Xueqing's long sword and disappeared. Soul mark. Yin Nuoxing and the others looked at the long sword in surprise. That's not right. In the past banquets, there wouldn't be so many experts. It's just a gathering of young people. Why is it different this year? Murong Xuega scratched her head. Seeing more and more people, she felt uneasy. Isn't it just a few more people? Yin Nuoxing shrugged indifferently. Not only that, half of the big shots of the forces in Yuyan City are here. Murong Xuega shook her head. This made Yin Nuoxing a little confused. This was indeed a little abnormal. It was supposed to be a gathering of young people. Why were all those old guys here? I'll go and ask, Yin Nuoxing whispered. Without waiting for the other two to answer, she directly rushed into the bamboo forest. She slowly spread out her soul force. After detecting that there was no one nearby, she nodded and took off her black windbreaker. She took out the fiery red clothes from her pendant. Her face flashed, and a beautiful yet indifferent face appeared. She then casually tied her long hair and used the divine mirror of light to check herself. Only then did she walk out of the bamboo forest with satisfaction. She walked towards Jin Wang and the others with light steps. They all had their backs to Yu Xian and were looking at the small island in the middle of the heart-gathering lake. Staring at the gathering fate pavilion on the small island, Jin Wang let out a long breath. Suddenly, he felt his clothes being pulled. He couldn't help but turn his head and saw Yu Xian's indifferent face. He was stunned and said in surprise, Yu Xian, why are you here? Hearing the shout, Yao Hua and the others quickly turned around. However, they saw Yu Xian's long hair fluttering in the wind. She was glaring at Yao Hua. This made him shudder violently. He quickly retreated a few steps and hid behind Lei Ming. He even carefully peeked his head out to look at her. I was passing by and saw a lot of people here, so I came to take a look. Yu Xian retracted her gaze and looked at Jin Wang. She said, I heard that there is a gathering of the younger generation here. Senior Divine King, what are you doing here? We were invited by an unknown person to play in the gathering Fate Mountain Villa. Jin Wang shrugged and took out the black envelope. Yu Xian looked at it and her pupils slightly shrank. Moreover, it seems that we are not the only ones here. There are many other people. Jin Wang said meaningfully. He looked at several places. Yu Xian nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Mu Ling and the others also came over and asked about their well-being. They also complained about how they were tortured by Jin Wang. This made her look at Jin Wang and the others strangely. I'm going back. Finally, Yu Xian waved to the others, and her figure disappeared into the bamboo forest. Knowing that she didn't like crowded places, with Spirit and the others didn't urge her to stay. As for Yao Hua, he let out a breath of relief. Chapter 115. After spending some time in the bamboo forest, Yin Nuoxing came out of the bamboo forest and walked towards Murong Xuegu and the others. However, he stopped before he could get close. Murong Xuegu raised her eyebrows when she saw him. She pointed at Xueqing and mouthed, Trouble is here. Upon seeing this, Yin Nuoxing followed his gaze and saw that Xueqing was indifferently staring at the calm surface of the heart-gathering lake. Beside her, there was a well-dressed young man with a smile on his face, and he was continuously saying something to her. Behind the two of them, Bing Ling, who was dressed in an ice-blue robe, was indifferently watching. The people around her were also doing the same. Yun Nuoxing also knew the elegant young man. He had met him once in the Serene Flame Pavilion that night. He was Cheng Tianxing, who called Xue Qing his junior sister. Beside Bing Ling, Cheng Hong's figure was also very clear. Yun Nuoxing frowned and looked at Murong Xue Ge. The latter happened to look over and nodded. That is Cheng Tianxing, the second young master of the Cheng family. He is also a disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa. It is said that he is the #1 pursuer of Fairy Xue. He has been pursuing her for several years, but Xue Qing doesn't seem to be interested. Pursuing a girl is not all about pestering, especially when the girl is not an ordinary girl. Looking at Xue Qing's indifferent face, Yun Nuoxing sighed. He pointed at Xue Qing and transmitted his voice to Murong Xue Ge. So, should we interfere or not? Murong Xue Ge was stunned. She looked over there and then looked at herself and Yun Nuoxing. Finally, she shrugged and spread her hands, not knowing what to do. Senior brother, I don't have such thoughts right now. Until I meet master's requirements, I won't consider relationships. There's nothing for you to worry about. Xue Qing let out a long sigh. She turned her head to look at Cheng Tianxing and shook her head faintly. If I can step into the Juyuan Pavilion this time, can you give me a chance? Cheng Tianxing saw her indifferent look and just smiled. The Gathering Fate Pavilion only opens once every 100 years. At other times, only those who meet the requirements can step in. Countless young geniuses and powerful experts can't step in. Senior brother, what do you have to guarantee this empty promise? Xue Qing frowned, seemingly unhappy. Since ancient times, there have been countless young geniuses. If someone was able to establish a foothold here, so can I? In the future, there will definitely be a place for me in the God realm. Cheng Tianxing laughed heartily and said proudly. When Yun Nuoxing saw Ling Tian's willpower, she muttered under her breath that he was an idiot. How many geniuses have there been since ancient times? How many of those who said, I will soar above the heavens, actually managed to stand above the clouds? Seeing his frivolous appearance, Yun Nuoxing furrowed his long eyebrows and muttered in a somewhat displeased manner. Murong Xue Ge smiled and said nothing. Senior brother, Xue Qing suddenly shouted, causing the surroundings to quieten down. Yun Nuoxing saw that Xue Qing's jade-like hand that was holding the long sword had turned slightly pale. She seemed to be a little angry. Xue Qing lowered her eyelids and shook her head forcefully. No matter how good you talk about the future, the present is the present. I only treat you as a respectable senior brother. No matter what the elders, sect leader, or you say, my heart will not change. I don't need you to interfere in my matters. I've said before, if I don't want to, even master won't be able to make me lower my head. Xue Qing's hand that was holding the long sword slowly loosened. She let out a long sigh and said indifferently, there are countless girls who are more outstanding than me in this world. Why do you have to pursue such an unwilling matter? But I only like you. Cheng Tianxing roared. I gave up the chance to enter the small divine continent for you. I waited for you for 5 years so that I could have the chance to enter with you. Seeing how stubborn Cheng Tianxing was, Xue Qing also sighed softly. She didn't say anything else and walked towards the other side. Xue Qing. Cheng Tianxing panicked when he saw that she was about to leave. He hurriedly chased after her and reached out to grab her hand. However, before he could reach out, a white, jade-like hand gently clasped his hand, causing him to be stunned. Little guy, a forced melon won't be sweet. Love is all about fate. If it's yours, it won't run away. Grabbing Cheng Hong's wrist, Yun Nuoxing sighed and said with a heavy heart. Xue Qing turned her head in surprise when she heard these old-fashioned words. Mei Mao's eyes were filled with splendor, as if she didn't expect him to make a move. It's you again. Cheng Tianxing's face sank the moment he saw Yun Nuoxing. A cold expression flashed across his face when he saw the latter grabbing his wrist. He suddenly flung the white, jade-like hand away. When Yin Nuoxing came out, Bing Ling and Cheng Hong's faces also changed slightly. The former gradually calmed down, and his eyes turned a few times. No one knew what he was thinking. As for the latter, a cold light flashed through his eyes. A wisp of killing intent flashed through his eyes, but he concealed it very well. "You can't interfere in my matters." Chang Tianxing's gaze suddenly became sharp as he roared. He clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it towards Yun Nuoxing. The astonishing strength brought along a gust of wind and blew the bamboo leaves on the ground away. Young people are too impulsive. Yun Nuoxing sighed heavily. He raised his right hand, and a small formation was woven in his palm with lightning speed. It was completed in an instant and slowly rotated on his palm. Without even looking, he used his hand to meet the fist. Bang! A soft sound was heard as Chang Tianxing's fist landed on the light formation. Waves of power passed through it. However, before he could retract his fist, an even more majestic force exploded from the formation and instantly blasted his fist. Facing the backlash of this strange force, Chang Tianxing's body retreated as if he had suffered a heavy blow. His feet scraped the ground and drew 2 long trenches. He only stopped after he was pushed back dozens of meters. A stream of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. "Young master!" The commotion immediately attracted the attention of everyone at the heart-gathering lake. Then, a few figures flashed over and quickly landed beside Chang Tianxing to support him. "What's the commotion?" He injured the second young master of the Cheng family with just 1 blow. Where did this young man come from? He seems to be much younger than the second young master. We can't afford to see blood in Juyuan Mountain Villa. Someone go and persuade him. He's from the Cheng family. You go? Hearing the murmurs from the surroundings, Cheng Hong's face turned ugly. He looked at Bing Ling beside him and said in a low voice, "Young Master Bing, what should we do?" Bing Ling glanced at him indifferently. His gaze was still indifferent as he looked at Yin Nuoxing and said, "We can't find out his identity. Perhaps he's a fellow who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. We don't know his strength either." After saying that, he shut his mouth. Cheng Hong seemed to have understood something. He nodded slightly and gave a look to the people beside him. Immediately, the expressions of those people, as well as the people supporting Chang Tianxing, became serious. A cold, killing intent filled the entire space. It was incomparably oppressive. When the cold, killing intent appeared, the surrounding people all retreated, leaving a spacious area. Only Yin Nuoxing, Xueqing, and the other 2 were left. The Cheng family experts also took a step forward. Their ethereal auras merged together and formed a storm that pressed down on Yin Nuoxing. "Everyone from the Cheng family, listen up. Capture this brat." While everyone was preparing, Chang Tianxing, who had been pushed back by a single blow, finally couldn't stand the gazes from the surroundings and roared furiously. Quite a number of people were stunned when they heard Chang Tianxing's roar. This fellow was truly shameless. Putting aside the fact that he was looking for trouble, he even wanted to use numbers to bully someone. The Cheng clan's face was about to be lost today. Hey. Even if you can't win, you shouldn't call for help. While everyone was muttering in their hearts, Yin Nuoxing angrily placed his hands on his waist. It was as if the intimidating aura didn't exist. He stared at Chang Tianxing and couldn't help but shout. Xueqing tugged at his sleeve. Yin Nuoxing turned his head and saw her gently shaking her head. However, he didn't care and grinned. He took a deep breath and cupped his hand around his mouth. He shouted with an imposing aura, "Hey, is the person in charge of the Juyuan Mountain Villa here? Someone is causing trouble here. Are you going to do something about this? If you don't, then I will." His voice, which was mixed with an imposing manner, spread far and wide and covered the entire Juyuan Mountain Villa. Everyone present was stunned. Looking at him, he didn't seem to be in a hurry. Could it be that he has the strength to defeat these half-immortal experts, just by relying on his puny mortal stage cultivation? Xueqing and Xueqing were stunned when they heard him, and then they looked towards Yin Nuoxing. They saw his confident expression and didn't seem like he was trying to show off. and they were slightly puzzled. Could it be that this fellow can really kill these quasi-immortal realm experts? What an interesting little fellow. Jin Jinwang looked at him and couldn't help but smile, causing Yao Hua and the others to be stunned. After a long time, just when everyone thought that there wouldn't be a reply, a deep and vigorous voice came from the sky, causing everyone's heart to tremble. "Do as you wish." This light reply was as if it came from the sky. It was hard to fathom, and no one knew where the speaker was. What was even more shocking was that this random shout actually received a reply. Could it be that there was really someone in charge of this Ju Yuan mountain villa? Hearing this answer, Yin Nuoxing suddenly grinned. His smile was very bright, without any impurities, and it warmed people's hearts. However, in the next moment, it suddenly turned icy cold. A wave of coldness covered his entire handsome face, and his expression darkened. The change happened so fast that everyone couldn't react in time. Yin Nuoxing's right hand reached behind him and grabbed Xueqing's longsword at her waist. He gently pulled it out. After pulling out the longsword, Yin Nuoxing looked at Cheng Tianqing from afar. A ray of silver light spread from his palm to the longsword. Then he stretched out his left hand and hooked his index finger at Cheng Tianqing. He said indifferently, "Come, young Master Yin, don't be rash." Xueqing tugged at his robe worriedly and said somewhat nervously. In her opinion, it was tantamount to courting death for one person to face so many experts alone. Now that the people of Ju Yuan Mountain Villa said, "Do as you wish," she didn't know what they meant. Brother Yin now. Murong Shuegu also hurriedly transmitted her voice. However, when he saw the arrogant smile on Yin Nuoxing's face, he was slightly stunned. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt that the pressure didn't seem to be anything. Seeing Yin Nuoxing's frivolous posture, Cheng Tianqing was so angry that he laughed. He suddenly waved his hand and coldly shouted, "Kill him." As soon as Cheng Tianqing's voice fell, figures flashed and attacked Yin Nuoxing. The continuous aura blew the bamboo leaves in a radius of 10 feet. The two people standing beside him also personally experienced the terrifying pressure. He looked indifferently at the flashing figures. When the other party was 10 meters away from him, his unmoving body finally moved. He took a light step forward. It was a very small step, and he slightly raised his long sword that was suffused with silver light. A murderous sword aura suddenly erupted and turned into an invisible storm. It destroyed the aura of those immortal step experts and slammed into the crowd. At this moment, the crowd only felt suffocated when they looked at Yin Nuoxing. It was as if they weren't facing a person, but a giant sword that stood between heaven and earth. That invisible aura shocked everyone. The silver sword slowly drew a perfect arc. The movement was extremely slow, but they could see the trajectory of the silver light. The silver light sprinkled down, suffocating heaven and earth. Everyone suddenly froze. The figures that were rushing toward Yin Nuoxing also stopped in an instant. It was as if heaven and earth had stopped at this moment. Chapter 116. The Linghong sword contained a vast amount of space energy and a meager amount of time energy. That energy could not be controlled by anyone who wasn't a god. When Yin Nuoxing swung his sword horizontally, a wide arc appeared in the space. A vast sword-intense sword, and the group of people who were rushing towards him were all enveloped in this brilliance. A perfect circular sword arc crazily spread out in all directions. Crack! Boom! A heavy sound exploded like thunder from the ninth heaven, breaking the frozen space and causing everyone's hearts to tighten. Shortly after, an orderly explosion reverberated in the sky. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the Cheng family experts who were rushing towards Yin Nuoxing froze one by one. A light breeze blew past, and those people's bodies, including Cheng Tianqing, actually shattered like paper. A sword annihilated all of them. Turning them into ashes, the crowd's hearts trembled violently. More than a dozen half-immortal experts turned into ashes with a single sword strike. They didn't even see the silver-white sword arc clearly. Casually waving his long sword, Yin Nuoxing turned around and sheathed his long sword back into the scabbard at Xue Qing's waist. Seeing her slightly opened cherry lips and shocked face, he couldn't help but smile. He waved his hand in front of her, and only then did she come back to her senses. Mei Mao's eyes sparkled as she stared at Yin Nuoxing nonstop. This caused his handsome face to redden, and he turned his head away in embarrassment. Only then did he retract his gaze and say with a faint smile, "Young Master Yin, you have some secrets." Yin Nuoxing's expression froze. He looked over and saw Xue Qing's cheeky pout. Mei Mao stared at him with a smile. Yin Nuoxing was using her sword, and the sword contained her aura. No matter how small the movement was, she could detect it. When Yin Nuoxing's long sword was attached to her, she felt an extremely strong energy covering the long sword. However, seeing his awkward expression, she did not say anything. So strong. Yao Hua and the others opened their mouths wide in disbelief. Just a moment ago, they were discussing how long Yin Nuoxing could last, but in the next moment, they saw more than a dozen people turn into ashes. Cheng Hong's and Bing Ling's eyes trembled. The former's expression was extremely ugly. Although a half-celestial powerhouse was not the mainstay of the Cheng family, he was still a powerful force. Moreover, his own brother was killed in front of him. The resentment in his heart was extremely strong. If it were not for his lack of strength, he would have already rushed forward. Bing Ling did not say anything. She turned and looked at the young man in blue beside her. Now, it seemed that he was the only one who could capture Yin Nuoxing. When the young man in blue received her gaze, he slowly opened his eyes and looked at her calmly. Then he stared at Yin Nuoxing and said faintly, "Your sword skills are not bad." As a god, he could clearly feel that Yin Nuoxing's sword just now did not use a large amount of energy. Moreover, it also contained traces of space energy. With his strength of mortal level 6, it was impossible for him to touch space. Therefore, he attributed Yin Nuoxing's attack to the cultivation of a powerful sword skill. Sword skill. Yin Nuoxing's expression became strange. She looked at the god powerhouse of the ice and Snow Mountain Villa and could not help but sneered. The original power of Ling Hongjian was the power of space and also some time energy. He could not use those powers. Moreover, he could casually swing his sword and move it according to his heart. There was no need for any sword skill. When Ling Hongyan was attached to Xue Qing's long sword, a casual strike could tear space apart. However, he forcefully suppressed the power of Ling Hongjian, which was why the terrifying scene of the city being destroyed did not happen. "You don't understand." Yin Nuoxing sneered and shook her head. How could she know that the great figure who was ranked second on the divine weapon ranking, divine sword record, if it was Jin Wang who attacked personally, with their experience, they might be able to see through it at a glance. Xue Qing seemed to know a little, but she did not recognize it. When these words came out of Yin Nuoxing's mouth, it was very natural. However, it made the god powerhouse feel uncomfortable. A junior, a mere mortal level ant, he could kill her with one finger. However, in front of the crowd, she said the words, "You don't understand," in such a casual tone. It made it seem like the god of the ice and Snow Mountain Villa was very ignorant. "I don't understand?" The god expert sneered. "You're just an ordinary ant, an arrogant junior. I'm a dignified godly king, so how could you possibly know more than me? You killed the people of the ice and Snow Mountain Villa today. Do you want to bind yourself and follow me back to the ice and Snow Mountain Villa, or do you want me to cripple you?" Looking at the indifferent god, Yin Nuoxing suddenly laughed and shook her head. She said, "I am not interested in the ice and Snow Mountain Villa, so I will not go." That god powerhouse nodded slightly, and killing intent bloomed in his eyes. "Then you have to choose the second path." Yin Nuoxing slowly raised his head. A devilish look flashed across his handsome face, and he grinned. "As for crippling me, to be honest, with your strength that has just stepped into the divine king level, you are not qualified." Yin Nuoxing's words stunned everyone at the lakeside. No matter how amazing his performance was, it was still far from enough to talk to a god powerhouse like this. A cold smile appeared on Bing Ling and Cheng Hong's faces. In their eyes, Yin Nuo Planet was digging his own grave by going against the elders. Jin Jinwang was also stunned when he heard this. He looked at Yin Nuoxing curiously. The elder of the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa was only at the Divine King level, but they had long been divine underworld experts. The difference between the two of them was not small, but compared to Yin Nuoxing, it was still an insurmountable gap. Yin Nuoxing's arrogant look reminded him of Yu Xin, who had just left. This brat is comparable to that girl's arrogance. Thinking of her, Jin Jinwang could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. That brat indeed had the strength to fight against the Divine King. With a bunch of divine weapons and a sealing array, it would not be a problem to deal with him, let alone the Divine King of the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa. However, he did not know that Yin Nuoxing was Yu Xin, so he did not know where his confidence came from. Seeing Yin Nuoxing's impatience and not the fear that she had imagined, Xueqing was stunned. Her pretty face turned pale, and her jade-like hands clenched slightly. She bit her red lips. She had invited Yin Nuoxing with good intentions, but she did not expect things to turn out this way because of small grudge. While she was thinking quickly, a fair hand patted her shoulder. Xueqing turned her head and saw that it was Murong Shuege. Murong Shuege nodded. Xueqing was stunned. She took a deep breath, and a determined look appeared on her pretty face. She took a step forward and walked in front of Yin Nuoxing, shielding her behind her back. She raised her head, looked at the Divine King, and said in a deep voice, "Elder, today's matter is my senior brother's fault. Let's not interfere in the matters of the younger generation." Seeing that Xueqing was protecting her, Yin Nuoxing was a little stunned. But when she heard Xueqing's words, she remembered that Xueqing was a member of the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa. While everyone was having their own thoughts, the Divine King saw Xueqing's stance. After being stunned for a moment, he was so angry that he laughed and glared at Yin Nuoxing. After so many years, this was the first time he was told that he was not qualified by a junior to his face. Sure enough, the new generation excels the old. The youngsters nowadays are getting more and more arrogant. Very good, very good. Today, let this old man see with his own eyes why this old man is not qualified. The Divine King laughed heartily, but anyone could hear the anger in his laughter. It seemed that this elder of the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa was really infuriated by Yin Nuoxing's words. "Laugh, laugh, laugh. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Hearing the anger hidden in his laughter, Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Her evil spirit eyes slowly opened, and her pair of pitch-black eyes quickly became lustrous. However, she restrained that gorgeous radiance as she stared at the laughing Divine King. Her eyes faintly flashed with coldness, and her soul energy slowly spread out. Being stared at by Yin Nuoxing's cold gaze, the smile on the Divine King's face gradually became gloomy. His bronze palms slightly bent, and traces of heart-palpitating cold air flickered out, circling around his body. The cold chill made everyone in the distance shiver. "This old man doesn't believe that I can't deal with you today." With killing intent in his eyes, the Divine King slowly took a step forward. The moment his foot landed, his figure strangely disappeared. Seeing his figure disappear, Xueqing's face became even paler. She clenched her jade-like hands and grabbed Yin Nuoxing's wrist. Just as she was about to throw Yin Nuoxing away, a golden figure suddenly appeared in front of her. "All right, Ice and Snow Mountain Villa, you've caused enough trouble." A Divine King actually dared to make a move on a junior. "You're too shameless." Jin Jinwang, who had suddenly rushed in, caused everyone's faces to turn sluggish. The Divine King's figure also quickly appeared, stopping roughly 10 meters in front of Jin Jinwang. His gaze was gloomy as he looked at Jin Jinwang. His mind was rapidly churning. If Jin Jinwang was determined to interfere, not to mention him, even if half of the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa came in, they might not be able to hurt him. "Senior Jin Jinwang, what is the meaning of this? This is an internal matter of my Ice and Snow Mountain Villa. Senior, please don't interfere." The Divine King cupped his hands towards Jin Jinwang and said in a deep voice, Jin Wang pursed his lips, but he didn't buy it. He crossed his arms and coldly snorted. Didn't this little girl say that today's matter isn't her fault? If someone dies, then so be it. Why are you still causing trouble? Bullying the weak as the strong. Even I feel ashamed for you. The Divine King's face turned green and red from Jin Wang's words. He was so angry that his entire body trembled. His gaze flickered, and killing intent was faintly discernible. A wisp of cold air was also faintly discernible on his palm. TSK, old man, Senior Jin Wang has already given you a way out. Why aren't you scramming? Do you really want to fight? Seeing his uncertain expression, Yun Nuoxing suddenly sneered. Can you stop talking? Everyone was furious. They had never seen such a troublemaker before. Yun Nuoxing shrank her head from the roar. Huff, huff. Murderous intent immediately surged in the eyes of the young god. His heavy breathing was emitted from his nose as his murderous intent grew increasingly intense. However, just as his murderous intent reached its peak, an icy cold gaze suddenly swept over, causing the murderous intent in his heart to crumble instantly. He lifted his gaze and saw the gold god king staring at him with narrowed eyes. The corner of the Divine King's mouth twitched slightly. He regained some of his consciousness and hurriedly suppressed the killing intent in his heart. Jin Wang had already shown him enough respect by appearing to stop him. If he didn't appreciate it, he was afraid that he would be killed here. Just like how he regarded Yun Nuoxing as an ant, Jin Wang also regarded him as an ant. Buzz, just as the Divine King's killing intent dissipated, a strange sound wave suddenly swept over. It was like the sound of zither, like a pipa, and also like the sound of an ancient bronze bell. It mightily spread throughout the entire Ju Yuan mountain villa, causing all the onlookers to turn their gazes. It has begun. Xueqing couldn't help but murmur. Yun Nuoxing was also very curious. What had begun? The energy between the heavens and the earth suddenly boiled and turned into a rolling wave. It surged towards the Ju Yuan mountain villa from all directions. The density of the energy actually condensed into a thin mist. Under everyone's gaze, the Ju Yuan pavilion suddenly lit up. The scarlet light was just like the scarlet moon seen in the night sky. The Ju Yuan pavilion opens once every 100 years. At that time, everyone can enter and take a look. Every year at this time, a scarlet light will shine like a guiding light. Legend has it that the owner of Ju Yuan Pavilion built Ju Yuan Pavilion to look for his old friends. His family and friends had all died and entered the cycle of reincarnation. He was the only one left, waiting in a mortal world for the day his old friends returned. 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years. Only those who are of the same nature as him could step into the Ju Yuan Pavilion. Xueqing's soft words caused Yun Nuoxing's heart to skip a beat. For a person to wait alone in this world for countless years, how much determination, how much courage, and how important the person must be to make that person wait for so long. Chapter 117. The billowing energy fog became more and more intense, and the people present could not see more than 100 meters away. Even the Ju Yuan Pavilion was covered by the fog. Only the scarlet light penetrated the fog. Dong! Suddenly, there was a loud sound of something heavy crashing. Everyone turned their eyes to the place where the sound came from, but they did not see anything. The 8 mahogany corridors in front of them also lit up with faint light. It was the same scarlet color. It combined with the light of the Ju Yuan Pavilion and pierced through the fog. The scarlet color gave people a strange, ominous feeling. Seeing the changes on the heart-gathering lake, the young god flicked his sleeves and stared at Yun Nuoxing viciously. He couldn't wait to swallow Yun Nuoxing alive. However, with the gold god king here and the changes on the heart-gathering lake, he didn't have the chance to do so. Boy, you'd better pray that you don't fall into my hands. Otherwise, I'll let you have a taste of what it means to beg for death. The young god looked at Yun Nuoxing with resentment. His lips moved slightly, and a gloomy voice came out quietly. Suddenly, Yin Nuashing heard the resentful voice. He raised his eyebrows and turned to look at the young god. A bright smile suddenly appeared on his handsome face. He slowly raised his right hand and flicked his middle finger. Then, he said, "I'll return the same words to you. I hope I can still be so calm the next time I see you." Yin Nuashing's gesture and his disdainful words made the young god so angry that his face turned red. The fire of fury rushed to his head. Finally, there seemed to be some smoke coming out from the top of his head. The former could not help but laugh. Was this what it meant to be fuming from the 7 orifices? At percent asterisk, the young god suddenly flew into a rage, and his mouth was saying something. Yin Nuashing, who was too far away, could not hear him clearly. They could only see Bing Ling and Cheng Hong hurriedly pulling the former and retreating to one side. They could also see that the guy's hair was standing up, and his ferocious appearance was exceptionally terrifying. He's so angry that his hair is standing on end. What did you say to him? Murong Shuegu curiously watched the young god being carried away. She looked at Yin Nuashing and couldn't help but ask. Xueqing also looked over curiously. Yin Nuashing shrugged his shoulders and showed them the front of his middle finger, causing the two of them to roll their eyes. "Thank you, Senior Jin Jinwang." Yin Nuashing turned around and smiled at Jin Jinwang, who had been watching the three of them from the side. Hearing this, Jin Jinwang waved his hand indifferently, but the smile on his face widened a little. He said, "I have a good relationship with Master Xueqing, so it's not a big deal for me to protect you. However, the internal conflict in the Ice and Snow Mountain Manor seems to be bigger than I thought. That old fellow, doesn't he know how to do something about it?" His complaint made Yin Nuashing confused. She looked at Xueqing, but saw her biting her red lips with her pearly white teeth. She seemed to be in a difficult position, so she didn't ask any more questions. Jin Jinwang spread his hands and didn't explain anything. After giving a few instructions, he trotted back to Yao Hua and the others. Since he'd already shown up, there shouldn't be anyone who would target Yin Nuashing and the others. So what are we waiting for now? Looking around, Yin Nuashing realized that the energy in the air was abnormally dense. If one cultivated here, it would be twice the result with half the effort. There were also many people in the bamboo forest who sat down and entered a state of cultivation. This made him very surprised. Weren't they here to see the Ju Yuan Pavilion? Waiting? We're not waiting for anything. The banquet has already begun. Of course, if young Master Yin wants to go to the Ju Yuan Pavilion, you don't have to wait until now. You could have gone up just now. It's just that whether you can go up. Xueqing smiled and winked mischievously. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes at her. It's the annual energy tide. The Ju Yuan Pavilion is located above a huge dragon vein. Many people come here just to experience this energy banquet. It's not really a banquet. At this moment, Murong Shuega shook her head with a smile. Seeing that many people were cultivating around them, she wanted to find a place to sit down. However, she saw Yin Nuashing waving his hand and walking towards the mahogany corridor in front of him. Murong Shuega couldn't help but be stunned. "Young Master Yin, are you really going up?" Seeing Yin Nuashing's determined footsteps, Xueqing's expression became quite interesting. She looked around and saw that there were fewer people at the lakeside. Most of them were cultivating at the edge of the bamboo forest. She quickly trotted to catch up. "Since I'm already here, I'll be letting myself down if I don't go up and take a look." Yin Nuashing smiled. Legends and whatnot, he would know after trying. As for the so-called story, he was also very curious. He didn't know if an amnesiac like him could be considered as having a story. "If you don't want to go, you can stay and cultivate. You don't have to follow me." Turning around, Yin Nuashing saw that Xueqing and Murong Shuega were following him at a leisurely pace. He was a little surprised and couldn't help but ask. "As you said, since I'm already here and have reached the foot of the mountain, I didn't go up. If I don't go up and take a look at the Ju Yuan Pavilion, I'll be letting myself down." Murong Shuega scratched his head and smiled like a girl, which made Yin Nuashing shudder again. Imagining his graceful and enchanting movements and speaking in a coquettish voice, he had goosebumps all over his body. "Let's go with young Master Yin." If young master can really go up there, we'll be able to witness the elegance of the first person to go up to the Ju Yuan Pavilion in Yuyin City in 100 years. Xu Etching covered her mouth and smiled. In an instant, the radiance that bloomed seemed to have suppressed the surrounding red light. After staring for a while, Yin Nuoxing shrugged and looked at the mahogany corridor in front of him. He smiled and stepped on it. Then, let us witness a miracle. There weren't any unique decorations in the mahogany corridor. The craftsmanship was very exquisite, and one could smell an unusual fragrance. It was like the fragrance of flowers, but also like the fragrance of trees. It was very refreshing. After taking a breath, one would feel dozens of years younger. Of course, for the three young boys and girls, they couldn't understand this feeling. However, they still felt refreshed. They even quickened their pace and felt the wind under their feet. At the top of the corridor, there were some strange symbols engraved. They looked like talismans, but also like a lost language. They were crooked and densely engraved on the two ends of the corridor. These are the words of the primordial era. Xu Etching exclaimed in surprise when she looked up and saw these tadpole-like words. She had seen them in some ancient books. They were all unique and were priceless treasures in the market. Less than 1 in 10,000 of the items from the primordial era had been passed down to the present. Every one of them was very precious. Really? What's written? When Yin Nuoxing heard this, he looked at Xu Etching with excitement. He could barely recognize the words, but he couldn't recognize them. He didn't expect her to recognize them at a glance. I don't know. I can only recognize them as words from the primordial era if I were to interpret them further. Seeing his hopeful gaze, Xu Etching blushed and finished her sentence shyly. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. You can't read them with your divine sense. Moreover, if you stare at them for a long time, you will notice that the words will change. If you look away, they will return to their original state. It seems like it's a method to prevent theft. Murong Xuega retracted her soul power and sighed. How worrisome. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. On the floor of the mahogany corridor, a faint blue light flickered. Lines of energy matrices crisscrossed, as though there were hundreds and thousands of huge arrays unfolding here. With the help of the evil spirit eye, Yin Nuoxing could not clearly see what these arrays were for, but he could faintly feel that there were many probing energies gently entering his body before quietly fading away. There are many probing arrays engraved on the mahogany corridor. These arrays extend from the corridor all the way to the Jiyuan Pavilion at the top of the mountain. Xu Etching, who had been here a few times, couldn't help but smile when she saw Yin Nuoxing touching his arm. She was also like this the first time she came. When the probing light swept past her, she felt itchy all over. Just as Xueqing had said, along the way to the Yun Nuo planet, they saw many detection spirit designs. Some of the formation eyes were even placed on the mahogany corridor. The corridor was only a few hundred feet long, but there were no less than 100 different types of detection spirit designs. Some of them even had divine energy flowing within. Saint spell arrays. They can only be activated by people who are at least array grandmasters. Jin Wang had explained to Yin Nuoxing about the arrays that emanated traces of sacred energy. When he recognized them now, he was still a little surprised. Unlike ordinary arrays, the energy matrices of the Saint spell arrays were golden. Its power was also incomparable to ordinary arrays. The distance of 100 feet was reached in a few minutes. Looking at the hill in front of him, Yin Nuoxing paused for a moment before stepping onto it. Boom! Just as he stepped onto the hill, Yin Nuoxing's expression suddenly changed. The silent air seemed to have been filled with lead and became abnormally heavy. It was as if the sky had fallen and pressed down on him. That heavy pressure made it hard for him to breathe. Beads of sweat appeared crazily on his forehead. Don't resist. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to release his aura to resist, Xu Etching hurriedly stopped him. He turned around in shock and saw Xu Etching lifting her jade-like feet and walking into the hill. Her delicate body only paused for a moment before returning to normal. She even walked briskly for 2 steps before turning back. If you release your aura to resist, you will be repelled. Does young Master Yin want to try? Sticking out her tongue, Shueqing smiled charmingly, making Yun Nuoxing speechless. Repelled? Roar! Murong Shuega looked at it suspiciously, as if she didn't believe it. As soon as she stepped onto the hill, she felt the vast and heavy pressure. A soft cry came from her throat, and an ethereal aura broke out of her body. Bang! However, just as she thought that the pressure on her body would disappear, she realized that a huge force had hit her body. The scene in front of her changed abruptly. When Yun Nuoxing saw her, she was sent flying into the mahogany corridor like a cannonball. Gulp! Violently swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Yun Nuoxing hurriedly suppressed his restless aura and took a step into the small mountain. Immediately, the enormous pressure diminished by quite a bit. It was no longer as heavy as when half a foot had entered. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He laughed dryly as he watched Murong Shuega walk back. Black lines drooped down on her elegant and beautiful face. She couldn't help but cover her waist and said angrily, "I sprained my waist this time. Who told you not to listen to me?" Shueqing pouted and snorted when she saw his unhappy face. Murong Shuega smiled embarrassedly and followed the two into the hill. Chapter 118. At the lakeside of the heart-gathering lake, many silhouettes could be seen amidst the misty fog. Even though the sun was shining brightly, the place was slightly dark. The scarlet light shone from the top of the small mountain in the middle of the lake and the long corridor by the lakeside. On the small mountain that no one could see, 3 silhouettes were slowly walking along the steep mountain path. Every step they took was imprinted with a formation. The bright golden light under their feet flickered, and even the surrounding space was slightly distorted. Stepping on the dense formations, Yun Nuoxing did not forget to open his evil spirit eye as he walked. He looked at the Saint Technique formations under his feet, and among them were many talisman formations. The dazzling array of formations made him want to stay here and not leave. It was as if he had forgotten the purpose of climbing this small mountain. The heavy pressure became heavier with every step they took. However, the formation beneath their feet would also flash with some golden light, which would enter their bodies and go straight to their minds. Then, the pressure that had just increased would quietly fade away, as if nothing had happened. Every time the golden light entered his mind, Yun Nuoxing would uncontrollably recall some of the things that had happened in the past. Divine Weapon City, Young Heroes Competition, Red Star Academy, Star Spirit City, Constellation City. Scenes after scenes flashed before his eyes quickly, like a lantern. It made him think that he was going to die in the next moment. Looking at the memories that were churning in his mind, Yun Nuoxing's eyes were a little dazed. Among them, one scene appeared the most frequently in his mind. The towering ancient tree, the one that was called the World Tree. It was a huge tree that reached the sky. Under the tree, there was a little girl with fiery red hair. That scene was very blurry, but it replayed countless times. It was like a needle stirring his brain. Every time it appeared, there would be a sharp pain in his head, causing him to quickly cover his head. This had never happened before, and he did not know why it was happening. "Young Master Yin," a crisp voice called out to him, causing his dazed mind to regain some clarity. He slowly raised his head, only to see Shueqing looking at him worriedly. Mei Mao seemed to feel sorry for him. She gently raised her hand, and her pure white sleeve gently wiped his face. He did not know when, but his face was stained with tears. "Nuoxing, pull yourself together." Murong Shuegu also patted Yun Nuoxing's shoulder vigorously. Her lips moved slightly, and a wisp of voice with some magic rushed into his mind. The almost annihilated clear light finally solidified, and both of them breathed a sigh of relief. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Seeing that Shueqing's sleeve was still stuck to her face, her handsome face couldn't help but turn red, and she quickly asked, "Little Mountain's Saint Spell Formation will evoke the deepest and most important memories in one's heart. Don't get lost in it. Don't chase after it." Shueqing said softly. Hearing this slightly strange effect, Yin Nuoxing seemed to be in a difficult position. Compared to other people, his memories were pitifully few, but in those shallow memories, there were quite a few that he wanted to imprint into his soul. Many of those scenes were his existence to this day, and even the reason for his existence. Yin Nuoxing shook her head and smiled bitterly. I keep having the feeling that these things were left behind for me. TSK, don't be so narcissistic. The two rolled their eyes and didn't give him any face. They teased. Why don't you say that the owner of Ju Yuan Pavilion is looking for you? Maybe it's true? Yin Nuoxing smiled mysteriously, which stunned both of them. He waved his hand and said, I'm just joking, but there's something that I agree with. If you think something will happen, then it's more likely to happen. The things in my memories are quite unforgettable. If I ever get lost in my memories, can I trouble the two of you to help me? Yin Nuoxing threw a flirtatious glance at Xueqing and said in a seemingly casual and self-deprecating manner. Seeing his mysterious look, Xueqing and Murong Shuegu were stunned for a moment, but they didn't think too much about it. They smiled and said, Okay, just don't drag us down when the time comes. Yin Nuoxing shrugged and continued walking towards the top of the mountain. Xueqing and Murong Shuegu followed closely behind. The steep mountain path circled around the 100-feet-tall mountain for God knows how many times. Finally, after turning a corner, they saw a stone staircase that led to a small pavilion at the top of the mountain. Only then did the three of them let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that they had reached the top. Enduring the pressure and having the array prying into their memories, this journey was as long as ascending to the heavens. I definitely won't come here next time. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly in her heart. She turned around and looked at the place that protruded out of the mountain wall. It was shrouded in mist. At a glance, she couldn't see how deep it was. It was as if she was high up in the sky, like a paradise on earth. She turned her gaze slightly and looked ahead. At the top of the 9-step stone staircase, there was a small pavilion that was emitting a gentle red light. Who knew how many days it had been exposed to the sun and wind, but it seemed to have never changed. Faintly, a mysterious wave spread out from it. It seemed ethereal and untouchable, but it tugged at Yin Nuoxing's heartstrings. The frozen ancient well was showing signs of thawing. Sensing the subtle changes in her state of mind, Yin Nuoxing's heart skipped a beat. Xianyin said that he was a blockhead, and Yuyin said that he didn't know how to flirt. Only he knew that his heart was an eternally frozen ancient well. It wouldn't have any ripples or movements. However, just by approaching the Ju Yuan Pavilion, his state of mind was showing signs of thawing, throbbing. He was startled by this sudden movement. This state of mind wasn't deliberately shaped by him. It seemed to be his nature, as if he was born this way. However, no matter what, this was his state of mind. The sudden change scared him so much that he sucked in a breath of cold air. Forget it. In this world, only I can affect myself. However, it only fluctuated for a moment before it cooled down. Yin Nuoxing couldn't be bothered with it. She muttered in her heart and ignored it. Why are there 9 steps? Yin Nuoxing was a little confused when she saw that there were only 9 steps that stopped her from reaching the Ju Yuan Pavilion. Wasn't this journey too simple? Was it just a little pressure and a little prying? However, this thought disappeared in a flash. If it was so simple, it wouldn't have become a legend, and Xueqing wouldn't have said within 100 years. Obviously, there was something strange about the last 9 steps. The 9 steps symbolize the heavens. There are 9 levels in the heavens, and each level is a level. This is a master's interpretation of the 9 steps. It is also said that these 9 steps represent the 9 kinds of tribulations in the world. If you want to reach the Ju Yuan Pavilion, you have to walk through these 9 steps. Of course, you have to walk on air, Xueqing said with a smile. She even winked at Yin Nuoxing in the end. Her mischievous look made Yin Nuoxing shudder. It will bounce off, right? She asked weakly. Yin Nuoxing glanced at Murong Shuegu. The latter's face darkened, and she smiled bitterly. Why was she looking at him? Wasn't it just bounced off once? Did she have to remember it so clearly? Yes. Xueqing smiled sweetly. Her beautiful face was very gentle, and it warmed his heart. I'm handsome. I'll go first. Yin Nuashing had just taken a step forward when Murong Shuega raised her eyebrows and pulled him over. She walked forward with a beautiful smile on her devilishly handsome face. The former really wanted to slap her, but he nodded and didn't stop her. Be careful. This 9 levels celestial stairway is even more powerful than the hundreds of saint spell formations below. Xueqing, who had experienced it before, quickly reminded her. Murong Shuega also looked solemn and nodded. She looked at the first step in front of her, gently lifted her foot, and slowly descended. Buzz! A sharp buzzing sound suddenly sounded in the void. Not only did Yin Nuashing and the other two hear it, but even the people who were cultivating by the lakeside of the Jushin Lake clearly heard the piercing sound. Everyone seemed to have tinnitus and covered their ears in pain. What's going on? Yin Nuashing's face was filled with pain as he covered his ears with all his might and grimaced in pain. Beside him, Xueqing was also covering her ears in pain. She turned her beautiful eyes and saw that the light from the gathering fate pavilion had suddenly become brighter. It was as eye-catching as the sun in the thick fog. Buzz! On Murong Shuega's side, the 9 steps suddenly lit up with a bright golden light. It was very dazzling, and, for a moment, it actually overshadowed the light of the Jiyuan pavilion. A golden light suddenly rushed out from the first stone step along the soles of his feet and rushed to his head like lightning. The 3 of them were shocked. The light element in Yin Nuashing's body also broke out, but before he could move Murong Shuega away, the golden light suddenly rushed to his head. Bang! In the depths of his mind, a golden light suddenly bloomed, and a low explosion sound burst out, which made his eardrums hurt. Under this explosion, Murong Shuega's consciousness was directly blasted into a daze. Her eyes were filled with golden light, and her mind was full of chaos. Her body fell down weakly, and Yin Nuashing quickly rushed over to catch her. This strange state lasted for quite a long time, and then gradually improved. When Murong Shuega's consciousness was restored, the pain in her head had gradually weakened. When she opened her eyes, she saw Yin Nuashing and Xueqing looking at her anxiously. Their mouths were still opening and closing, as if they were calling her name. Shuega! A voice that contained the power of the soul directly penetrated Murong Shuega's soul. Yin Nuashing shouted. When he saw her slowly opening her eyes, he also heaved a sigh of relief and helped her sit up. Are you okay? There are so many stars swaying in front of my eyes. There's so much fog in front of my eyes. Could it be that I've come to heaven? Murong Shuega smiled foolishly. Heaven your head. Yin Nuashing didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and knocked her head. The rejection of the 9-step stairway this time is really strong. Young Master Yin, why don't you not go? Seeing Murong Shuega's appearance, Xueqing looked at Yin Nuashing with a worried frown. Hearing this, Yin Nuashing raised his head, and his playful heart was aroused. Looking at the worry on her pretty face, he couldn't help but tease. Are you worried about me? Xueqing's pretty face blushed, and she rolled her eyes at him. Just when she was about to say something, she saw the clarity in his black eyes and that bright and clean smile, which didn't make her feel any repulsion in her heart. Only then did she remember that when they first met at the Serene Flame Pavilion, it was also when she saw Yin Nuashing's delicate and powerless look. That was the first time she mustered up the courage to talk to a stranger. Later on, she saw the clarity in his eyes, which was completely different from how others looked at her. Although he seemed to like teasing her, she didn't see his gaze change. Shuega, I'll leave it to you. I'll also go and see what's so amazing about this so-called 9-step stairway. Seeing that she didn't speak for a long time, Yin Nuashing pursed his lips, then stood up and waved his hand, causing his windbreaker to flutter. He took a deep breath, and his gaze suddenly became fierce. Then, he suddenly stepped on the first step. Xueqing also stared at Yin Nuashing's foot. However, just as the two of them were waiting for something to happen, the surroundings were silent. The light in the Juyuan Pavilion was still resplendent, and the 9-step stairway was still suffused with golden light. There wasn't a single sound, nor was there any change. Yin Nuoxing and Xueqing were both stunned. The former was even a little dumbfounded. He was already mentally prepared to welcome all kinds of impacts and pressures, but nothing happened. It was as if he had punched cotton, which made him feel rather depressed. Moreover, even the pressure of the Saint Technique array had disappeared. Could it be? Then a thought was born in his mind, and he couldn't get rid of it. Driven by this thought, Yin Nuoxing's body trembled, and he actually continued to raise his foot, stepping onto the second step. Thump, thump, thump. Yin Nuoxing continuously stepped on the steps that represented the 9-step stairway, and in a spurt of energy, he suddenly rushed to the position of the 8-step stairway. Looking at the last step, he took a deep breath, while Xueqing and Mei Mao were a little stunned. He reached the top. Previously, when she had just reached the first step stairway, she was also sent flying by a huge force. Yin Nuoxing didn't know this, and he only felt that it was very strange. Xueqing had just said that the probing power of the 9-step stairway was stronger than the Saint Technique array below, but when he came up, he didn't feel any probing power. It was as if he was walking on flat ground, and it was no different from walking on an ordinary stairway. Looking at the last step, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. Just as he was about to step on it, his body suddenly paused, and he abruptly looked up. A look of horror and fear flashed across his eyes. There was no movement in the quiet Ju Yuan pavilion, and only a scarlet light quietly bloomed. In the Ju Yuan pavilion, there was a stone table and 2 stone stools. On the stone table, there was a chessboard, and on each side of the chessboard there was a chess box. The chess pieces of the 2 colors looked as smooth as jade. What shocked Yin Nuoxing wasn't the chessboard, but the figures sitting on the stone stools. Her entire body was wrapped in a soft and slightly bright light, and upon closer inspection, it was a slender figure. She sat there like a statue, motionless. Her long black hair fluttered gently, and it was extremely smooth. It floated with the wind and curled on the ground like a blooming flower. "There's someone here." Yin Nuoxing turned pale with fright. When he walked up, he didn't see anyone here. Moreover, that person seemed to be a woman, and a holy aura flowed around her, like a fairy from the 9 heavens. However, she gave him an unusually cold pressure, as if the person in front of him wasn't a saintess, but a great demon. Chapter 119. In the ancient pavilion, the scarlet light slowly faded as Yin Nuoxing stepped onto it. What replaced it was a gentle azure light. The sudden change stunned Xueqing. Although she had never been to the Ju Yuan pavilion before, she had heard of the things that happened to the people who had been to the Ju Yuan pavilion. The Ju Yuan pavilion had never undergone such a change before. The changes in the Ju Yuan pavilion were also noticed by the people by the lakeside. They had been interrupted by the shriek earlier, so everyone could see the changes at the top of the mountain. Could it be that someone has climbed up the Ju Yuan pavilion? Almost everyone had the same thought. They immediately scanned their surroundings, trying to find out who had disappeared. It should be the people who had climbed up the Ju Yuan pavilion. Bang! A low and deep muffled sound attracted everyone's attention. When they turned their gazes, they saw a few human figures flying out from the mahogany corridor. This caused the crowd to be surprised. Someone hurriedly walked out and helped those people up. After that, he muttered something. Soon after, that person raised his head. His eyes were filled with surprise. "What happened?" someone asked impatiently. "My junior brother said that there were 3 people in front of the Ju Yuan pavilion. However, when they saw someone climb up the Ju Yuan pavilion, they were ejected by the Saint Technique array." That person frowned and said truthfully, "Someone really climbed up, although they had guessed earlier. They could not help but gasp in shock when they heard the news." "Did you see what that person looked like?" someone asked anxiously. Hearing this, the people who were ejected shook their heads. They had only seen 3 blurry figures at the top of the mountain. They did not notice anything else. "So we can't go up now?" Everyone sighed. It was a pity that they could not see the person who had climbed up the Ju Yuan pavilion. Jin Wang stood in front of the mahogany corridor and gently pressed his palm forward. After a while, he touched a transparent object. It was very hard. When he pressed hard, he could see the space rippling like water. Jin Wang sighed, turned around, and said slowly, "It's a restrictive spell. Now we can't enter the heart-gathering lake, and the 3 people inside can't come out. We can only wait." Hearing him say so, everyone could only suppress the anxiety in their hearts. They all stretched their necks, wanting to see through the dense fog and see the face of that person. At the same time, in front of the Zhu Yuan pavilion, Yun Nuoxing looked at the person sitting on the stone bench who gave him a sense of holiness. However, there was uncontrollable fear in his eyes. Only when he was there would he know that this was not a saint, but a demon king with a cold aura. That soul-stirring cold aura was incompatible with his appearance. At that moment, the woman sitting in the Jiyuan pavilion seemed to have sensed something. Her hair trembled slightly. Then, she turned her head slightly to let Yun Nuoxing see her face. It was breathtakingly beautiful, ethereal, indifferent. These 2 words appeared in Yun Nuoxing's mind. This was his first impression of her. It was completely different from her aura. Taking a deep breath, Yun Nuoxing forced himself to calm down. He gathered his courage and looked straight at the pair of rainbow-colored gem-like eyes. However, with this look, he felt a great pressure penetrating the space and pouring into his mind. It was like an impact, causing him to jerk his head back. It was as if he had been pierced by thousands of arrows. Large droplets of sweat dripped from his forehead, and his chest rose and fell rapidly. Gulp! The sound of swallowing echoed clearly in the Zhu Yuan pavilion. Yun Nuoxing quickly lowered his head, not daring to look at that pair of beautiful eyes again. His heart was beating fast. Damn it! He had never heard of such a powerful person in the Zhu Yuan pavilion. This look almost scared him out of his wits. Junior Yun Nuoxing has no intention of stepping into this place. If I have disturbed you in any way, I hope that Senior will forgive me. Yun Nuoxing clasped his hands together towards the figure and respectfully said, after which he moved his feet and slowly retreated. The feeling that this person gave him was too strange. 2 conflicting auras caused him to have no choice but to be cautious. Play chess with me. Just as Yun Nuoxing retreated, a gentle but emotionless voice of nature rang in his ears. It seemed to have a hint of coquettishness. However, no matter what this voice was, as soon as he heard it, his vision blurred. When he regained his senses, he realized that he was already sitting on a stone bench. Clouds and mist lingered around him. It was like a fairyland. The 9-step stairway was gone, as if he was really at the top of a mountain. Yun Nuoxing had already experienced such a thing twice. However, it still made him feel a chill in his heart. After swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and encouraged himself in his heart. After hesitating for a long time, he finally lifted his gaze slightly. On the stone bench across from him, the ethereal and ice-cold woman was slowly pouring tea. There were 2 exquisite cups in front of her. There was no strong pressure, but it made Yun Nuoxing feel anxious. However, since he had come and seen, Yun Nuoxing naturally relaxed and quickly restrained his emotions. The other party's strength was too terrifying. He did not have the slightest ability to resist. It was also because of this that he was not worried that the other party would do anything to him. After all, the other party had such strength that she could kill him with a casual wave of her hand. He could not even draw out his Linghong sword. It would be boring to play these meaningless tricks. Moreover, didn't she call for a game of chess after being stunned for a moment? Yun Nuoxing lowered his head and saw a cup of tea quietly placed in front of him. The woman gently held the teacup with both hands. Mei Mao's eyes were slightly closed, and she seemed to be tasting it carefully. Yun Nuoxing also imitated her. He slowly lifted the teacup and took a light sniff. He did not know what kind of tea this was. Just a light sniff had a magical power that seemed to make him put down all his emotions and return to his original state. Clack! The sound of a chess piece gently touching the chessboard made Yun Nuoxing come back to his senses. He lowered his head and saw the woman gently press a chess piece with her white, crystal-like hand. Then, she placed her hand on the chess box and gently moved it. Her eyelids were slightly lowered, and she kept looking at him. She did not say a word, but her eyes seemed to be telling him something. Was it really a game of chess? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He carefully raised his head and looked at the woman. At this moment, when he looked at her, there was no longer the impact from the first time. Their eyes looked at each other in the void, and there was only peace. That pair of crystal-like, gem-like eyes was like an ancient pool, unfathomable. After a long while, Yin Nuoxing was the first to be unable to bear this kind of gaze. His handsome face turned slightly red, and he hurriedly averted his gaze. His fingers picked up a black chess piece and gently placed it down. It was said that playing chess was like carving an array, requiring one to be completely focused. The two of them did not speak. Yin Nuoxing was completely focused on the chessboard, to the point that he had even unconsciously opened his evil spirit eye. On the other hand, the girl was constantly looking at him, her eyes never once looking at the chessboard. Only her jade-like hand, after every move Yin Nuoxing made, would pick up a chess piece and follow up. In the small pavilion, only the crisp ticking sound of the chess pieces landing on the chessboard could be heard. Outside the gazebo, Xueqing watched as Yin Nuoxing stepped into the Jiyuan pavilion. In an instant, the place was covered by energy mist. Faintly, there was a restrictive force rising from the 9 heavenly steps, preventing people from entering. She reached out and pressed a few times on the space around the 9 heavenly steps. As expected, she touched the barrier. She could only helplessly retreat. Murong Xuega also sighed. What do we do? Xueqing turned around and asked Murong Xuega with a frown. What do we do? What can we do? Hearing this, Murong Xuega sighed and smiled bitterly. This hill is now filled with restrictive force. We can't enter or leave. We've already walked through the other 7 passages. It's useless. We can't see the outside, and the outside can't see the inside. Xueqing nodded helplessly. Mei Mao looked at the Jiyuan pavilion in confusion. She came back to the Jiyuan pavilion every year, but she had never seen such an abnormal phenomenon. It was different from what was recorded in the rumors. In the past, there were people who went up to the Jiyuan pavilion, but there was no such reaction. Then let us witness a miracle. Thinking of what Yin Nuoxing said casually, Xueqing and Murong Xuega smiled bitterly. It's really as that guy said. They had witnessed a miracle, but what was going on now? They couldn't see what was happening in the Jiyuan pavilion. Now, they couldn't even go down the mountain. Since we're standing, I'll go take a look. Fairy Shui, you stay here. After smiling bitterly for a while, Murong Xuega waved his hand and turned around. He walked down the path he came from and said softly. Xueqing nodded and watched him disappear from her sight. Then, she looked at the Jiyuan pavilion and sat cross-legged on the ground. After watching for a long time, Mei Mao slowly closed her eyes. In the Jiyuan pavilion, Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched wildly. Looking at the white chess pieces that occupied more than half of the board, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. What the hell? Every time he made a move, the woman would immediately follow up without hesitation. Moreover, she didn't even look at the chessboard. He could feel that her gaze was always focused on him, but he was very focused, so he didn't pay any attention to it. His face twitching, Yin Nuoxing raised his head and looked at the woman. The latter was still staring at him, but she held the teacup and took a sip of tea. He looked around. This place didn't seem to be in the Jiyuan mountain villa. The fog dissipated, and he could see the mountain peak in the distance. It didn't seem to be in Yuyan City either. The mountain peak they were on seemed to be the highest in this mountain range. He could still see the sun when he looked up. At this time, outside the pavilion, there was a mountain path. Where are we? Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but look at the woman and asked curiously. Thousand Dragon Mountain, Dragon Head Peak. The moment he finished speaking, she immediately answered, which shocked Yin Nuoxing. Thousand Dragon Mountain? Yin Nuoxing scratched his head, and a trace of doubt appeared in his eyes. Sure enough, it wasn't the Jiyuan mountain villa. However, he had never heard of this place and didn't know where it was. Let's play chess. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to ask a few more questions, the woman knocked on the stone table. The chessboard in front of her suddenly changed to another chessboard. Her cherry lips lightly spat out 2 words, causing Yin Nuoxing to almost fall off his chair. Black lines appeared on his forehead as he looked at the chessboard. Again? Play chess with me. Yin Nuoxing's face was bitter. Just when he was about to say something, the woman said those words. Her gentle tone carried an undeniable tone, which made his face even more bitter. Moreover, she even took the first step. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and could only agree. In the pavilion, the crisp ticking sound rang out again. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.